low wind prowled the gutted streets of King's Landing, carrying with it the ghost murmur of 100,000 unanswered prayers. Ash sifted from the twilight sky like a plague of quiet moths, the powder of what had been lives and roofs and memories. Broken masonry still groaned in its slow collapse. Beams ticked as they cooled after dragonfire, and somewhere beneath the dominant odor of charred cedar and scorched flesh lingered the sea salt tang of Blackwater Bay. Yet within that ruin, shadowed corridors of intact cellars and half-shattered keeps still offered webs of darkness deep enough to cradle a good blade, and a silence perfect for a girl who wore many names, but moved as no one at all. Arya Stark tasted blood on the air as she slipped between collapsed colonnades of the Red Keep. She did not know if it was fresh or only her imagination. There had been so much blood that her senses seemed forever stained by iron. But she followed it anyway, for every drop, be it old or new, pointed her toward the singular pulse she sought. Daenerys Stormborn, breaker of chains, burner of cities, the woman whose breaths the world now counted in tolls. Each inhale another bell rung over what remained of Westeros. Soft-footed across rubble, Arya advanced. Her boots, once supple leather bought in the markets of Bravos, were now cracked and gray with ash. Every step pressed burnt dust into fresh fissures. But Arya carried no weight of hesitation. She had walked longer roads weighted with heavier ghosts. Needle, that slender promise of home forged by Mikken long ago, was bound flat against her spine beneath her tunic. But tonight, she would need more than slender steel. Tonight she needed a lie, the deadliest gift the faceless men had ever taught her. She wore one already, the borrowed face of a black-haired Dothraki girl, as unremarkable among the unsullied as any stable hand. She had taken it in darkness the night before, with quiet prayers neither to the many-faced god, nor to the old gods of the north, but to her father, whose quiet honor she had once mistaken for powerlessness. Eddard Stark had shown her what true power was. The courage to do what must be done, and bear the cost in silence. A torch flickered at the far end of the corridor. Arya froze, letting the flame paint orange over the soot coating the wall beside her. She listened. Footsteps. Measured, heavy, unsullied. She could picture them. Spears held upright, helmets like beetle shells glinting, eyes forever forward. Men bred to obedience. They obeyed Daenerys now. They would die for her, unblinking, unbending. She could kill the pair quietly, but blood would pool and a patrol would find it, and whispers would come too soon. She needed only a few more heartbeats of secrecy. Arya pressed herself into the narrow shadow between two broken columns. She let her lungs go still. Her heart slowed. The unsullied passed, speaking not at all, spears scraping gently against bronze baldricks. Arya saw their silhouettes for a moment, black over orange torch lantern haze, and then they were gone. She exhaled. One step, then another. She reached the remnants of the audience hall, where once her father had stood accused and kingly words had rung. Now shattered balustrades lay in heaps, and the roof gaped to a sky bruised purple with dusk. In the center of that devastation stood the scorched iron bulk of the throne. Daggers still outstretched like starving fingers, yet even that icon no longer held the eye. For before it, haloed by a lone brazier, stood Daenerys Targaryen. Her silver-white hair had blackened at the tips where the flame of Drogon's wrath had kissed her, but it still shone like ghost light. Ash clung to her cheeks, but not a smudge marred her resolve. She wore no crown, the ruin itself crowned her. Around her shoulders hung the tattered banner of a dragon's wings, some half-cape sewn from the shadow of what she'd unleashed. Her eyes, violet vivid, gazed at the Iron Throne as though she saw not twisted steel but destiny hammered straight. Only two guards flanked her. Grey Worm at her right, the long spear planted into broken marble, and an unsullied standard-bearer at her left, the banner cloth torn but still defiantly crimson. Perhaps Daenerys believed none would dare strike within this sanctum. Perhaps she believed the world too awed to attempt. Arya's pulse thrummed. She felt the coldness that preceded her kills, a cutting away of every dream, every doubt, until only the task remained. She glided forward, each pace a bead threaded on silent string. She stopped within 18 paces, beneath a fractured arch. In that interval between her in-breath and her exhale, memory surged. The faces of those Daenerys had burned. Mother clasping babe, baker calling son beneath collapsed lintel, girl who had almost reminded Arya of my car running blindly across cobbles until dragonfire turned her to blackened bone. Arya saw them. Arya carried them. She exhaled. With a fluid motion, she removed the dagger concealed beneath the sleeve of the Dothraki tunic. Valyrian steel, taken from Littlefinger's corpse, honed and clean. She weighed its promise in her palm. But obstacles stood there. A commander hardened by war, a throne room open to echoes. She recalled another lesson from Braavos. The bravest way to kill is often the simplest. Arya let her shoulders sag. She donned fear like a garment. She stepped into the brazen light. Both Unsullied pivoted toward her, spears halfway raised. Their commander's gaze swept her over, registering. Stable girl, low threat. Arya sank to her knees. She pressed her forehead to the dusty marble and raised her trembling hand, the dagger concealed within her sleeve. Her voice, when it emerged, trembled like glass. She spoke in broken Dothraki. Kalesi Voseki, Ajinjeri, Ethkomari, Shafkeetart Day. Mercy, mother of dragons. I bring tidings. Daenerys turned, curiosity softening the rigid angles of command in her face. Rise, she said, her voice a hush softening the cavernous hall. Arya lifted her head but kept her gaze lowered. Subservient, harmless. The horsemen found a survivor, Arya whispered, forcing the rough accent of one who'd never left the Dothraki Sea. A Lannister boy hiding beneath the Red Keep. Golden hair. He begged to speak with the Dragon Queen. He said he knows secrets about the last of King's Landing's traitors. She swallowed as though dreading the Queen's wrath. He swore he could prove who conspired to poison the Unsullied's water wells. Daenerys' violet eyes flared, suspicion warring with a desire for certainty. Where is he? In the lower stables, Khaleesi, Arya answered. They feared to move him lest he die without confession. She forced her shoulders into a quiver. He is weak but alive. Grey Worm's glance flicked to his queen, awaiting command. The Unsullied were the edge of her will, and she wielded them like daggers. Daenerys turned toward the darkness beyond the ruined arch, as if weighing whether her vision of a cleansed world required tending to such small matters. At last she nodded. Bring him. I will judge his truth. Arya's heart pounded once, twice. She rose, bowing deeply, and pivoted away, guiding them into the corridor she had mapped for days while disguising herself among the camp's cooks. She led them past fallen gargoyles, through narrow choke points where even two could hardly stand abreast. Shadows deepened. Quiet pressed. The sea whispered beyond breached walls. 20 steps more. 10. Arya slowed, letting her escort close the gap behind her. She felt Grey Worm's spear tip nearly graze the base of her spine in its vigilance. She felt the weight of the Unsullied standard-bearer's breath behind. Perfect. She stumbled. A simple misstep. Her knee buckled upon loose stone. Grey Worm's reflex was swift. His free hand caught her shoulder, steadying the Dothraki girl. In that same breath, Arya twisted, the dagger sliding from sleeve to palm to Grey Worm's exposed neck. The edge parted flesh to cartilage in one motion, taught by the House of Black and White. Blood sprayed black-red across ash-gray walls. Before the standard-bearer's grunt could become shout, Arya had spun low, dagger reversed, the point punching beneath his chin and upward through palate to brain. He dropped, dead before his body realized. 2 heartbeats had passed. Daenerys' question echoed faintly from the throne room. What is it? No answer returned. Arya ripped the standard-bearer's helm from his skull and dropped her Dothraki gaze. She reached behind her to free needle. The narrow blade flashed like an icicle in winter's sun. She wiped Grey Worm's blood onto the dead man's crimson cloak, then donned the cloak to conceal the gore on her tunic. The helm she left. It would slow her. She turned, movement silent as an owl's wing, back toward the throne. Daenerys was alone with the throne and 2 corpses cooling in shadows she did not yet know she shared. The queen's back was to Arya. She stared upward at the melted ruin of the blades Aegon once claimed from fallen foes. In the hush that followed, Arya felt time stretch. The hush before an arrow's flight. The hush between lightning flash and thunder's roar. Would Daenerys turn? Would Drogon sense the tremor within his master's chest? The great dragon lay curled upon the courtyard beyond, but his tail flicked like a cat's restless dream. Embers drifted from his nostrils as he slept. Arya stepped into the hall. She did not run. Running rang alarms in stone. She padded, one measured foot after another, a dance along the edge of a knife. The distance closed. 10 paces. 6. A loose buckle on her borrowed cloak clinked against a bit of shattered metal. The sound was tiny, yet in that hollow hall, it rang as a clarion. Daenerys half turned, astonishment blooming across her face to see the stable girl once more. And so close. Then she saw the dagger, saw the blood, saw in Arya's eyes the implacable darkness of a north wind come for her. Daenerys inhaled to summon a cry that would rouse every unsullied within earshot. Arya hurled the dagger. Valyrian steel flew end over end in silver whisper and struck deep into the soft flesh above the Dragon Queen's left breast, slipping between ribs to heart. The breath intended to raise legions escaped only as a sigh. Daenerys staggered back against the Iron Throne. Blades that had slain 1,000 claimants now cradled her like cold thorns. Blood, bright and unroyal, coursed down her silk. Her violet gaze met Arya's gray and widened, not with rage. Arya had braced for rage, but with stunned betrayal. Behind those eyes flickered 100 hopes now extinguished. Chains breaking, cities freed, a world reborn through fire. The corner of her lips moved. Arya thought she would name some final decree, but the word that emerged was a broken whisper. Dracarys. But the fire this time did not come from the dragon. The queen's knees crumpled. She slid along the mangled iron, the dagger's hilt biting deeper under her own weight until she lay at its base, eyes glassed already. Arya approached, needle poised, though the kill was done. She watched Daenerys' final breath leave in a soft plume that joined the dust motes swirling upward. No satisfaction warmed her. This was necessity. A debt paid to thousands who would never know her name. And yet a wound opened in Arya too, one she had known since the day of the Red Wedding. Every act of justice cut her as keenly as it cut the guilty. She reached and reclaimed her Valyrian dagger, wiping it on the queen's sleeve. She pressed 2 fingers to the blood-slick hilt of the Iron Throne, not in reverence, but in reminder. Power well forged could still turn to ruin. Then she turned away. A roar shattered the stonework. Drogon's scream erupted from the courtyard, and stone dust cascaded from cracked ceilings. The dragon's eyes, ancient furnaces, had snapped open. He smelled death. His mother's death. And in that scent he tasted an agony the world had never known. His wings unfurled with a concussion of air that snuffed every surviving torch. Arya ran not away but toward him. Escape meant cities burned anew. The chain of destruction could end only if she clasped it at the source. She burst from the throne room into the scorched courtyard. Ash drifted, swirling in the hurricane of Drogon's wings. The beast's length, of obsidian scale and scarlet membrane, filled half the sky. His maw glowed molten, a kiln stoked by grief. Soldiers below scattered like startled ants. But Drogon tracked none of them. His gaze fixed on the stone doors, hiding the throne and the still heart within. He knew. He scented her killer even through walls. Arya should have been paralyzed. Yet within her surged the fierce calm of interlocking memories, of Nymeria's yellow eyes, of the silent pacing of direwolves across snow, of licking winter wind atop the wall. Dragons were creatures of magic, yes. But they were also creatures of instinct. Predators, proud and bound by strange webs of loyalty. She of House Stark knew something of such bonds. She sheathed both blades. She stepped into open court. Drogon, she called, voice slight beneath the thunder of his rage, yet the syllables climbed the air as clear as bronze upon bronze. The dragon's head whipped toward her. 2 eyes reflected a pyre of grief so absolute that for a heartbeat Arya glimpsed the edge of madness. Molten breath gathered. Arya raised her empty hands. She moved forward. One step, ash stirred. Second step, spear hafts of Unsullied ringed around her but dared not close. Third step, the dragon's maw glowed brighter. She felt heat against her cheeks. Ash melted into sweat along her brow. She spoke not to the soldiers but to the beast. "She freed you," Arya said quietly. "And you loved her." She kept walking. "She would not want you chained by others' orders." The words poured from some unknown reservoir inside her. Partly memory of old Nan's tales of ice worms, partly instinct woven with the quiet truths she had learned traveling the world. She was not the first mother you lost, dragon. Another step. 24 paces remained, yet she could see every enamel ridge of Drogon's fangs, each the height of her forearm. A gout of flame hissed inside his throat, but he did not release it. He watched, confused by her audacity, or her surrender. She reached the ring of scorched cobbles where Daenerys had landed him earlier. The heat, emanating from his scales, singed the hair on her forearms. If he decided to incinerate her, she would not even have time to scream. Arya unsheathed needle, reversed it, and thrust the point into the stone at her feet, surrendering the blade. She removed the Valyrian dagger and laid it beside Needle. She unfastened the cloak stained with Grey Worm's blood, letting it fall away, leaving her in plain tunic and leggings, a slight figure dwarfed by wings of night. She knelt. She bowed her head. Not in fear, she refused fear, but in recognition of a creature whose loss dwarfed even her own. When at last she looked up, fiery eyes regarded her with something beyond fury. Confusion? Curiosity? The tip of Drogon's snout lowered, nostrils flaring. Superheated breath blasted across her face, drying tears she had not realized she wept. The beast inhaled again, drawing the scent of her skin, her sweat, her blood, for Grey Worm's blood still spattered her forearms. And behind it all the tang of north wind, snow, pine pitch, pack, home. Something ancient stuttered in his gaze. Arya whispered, "If you burn me, they'll chain you. If you follow me, you'll fly free." She did not know how she knew he understood, only that the world's sound had narrowed to each thunderous beat of his heart. "Fly east, beyond their reach. I will not tell you what to do. Only ask, do not burn the weak for the sins of the strong." The dragon shifted his colossal weight. His breath ceased to glow. Smoke curled instead, uncertain. Behind Arya, frantic footsteps. Jon Snow dashed into the courtyard, sword half drawn, voice hoarse in a plea. "Arya, step aside." His eyes passed from the dragon to his sister, and flooded with horror when he saw the empty throne room behind. He had guessed her deed. "What have you done?" "Enough," Arya answered without looking back. Drogon's wings folded partway, settling in tumultuous cascades of embered air. Claws gouged black streaks across stone as he leaned forward. His head was a cathedral of obsidian plates, his eyes twin portals into living magma. Yet slow, deliberate, he lowered that titanic skull until the front of his snout touched the courtyard before Arya, like a ship's prow kissing harbor tide. Arya rose. She placed her hand upon the chitinous smoothness between his nostrils. Heat pulsed, slow and tidal. The skin there was scarred. Old arrow wounds from Meereen, fresh ballista grays from the Iron Fleet, and beneath all injuries lay the storm beat of a heart that could melt cities. She felt it. Jon advanced 2 steps, sword lowering in dawning disbelief. Unsullied, uncertain without Grey Worm's command, formed a semicircle, but hesitated, for Drogon had chosen his point of focus. Arya patted the ridge beneath Drogon's eye. She gathered her breath, then moved along his jaw, her boots clanging quietly upon scale ridges, like hammered shield plates. She walked until she reached the joint of his forearm, where a sinuous ladder of bone-spurred hide stretched up toward the neck. There she climbed, once taught by Forel that balance was all, a dancer's swift ascent. Her fingers found purchase in scaled crenellations. The watching soldiers gasped. Jon's mouth parted, but words failed. Arya settled atop Drogon's neck, just forward of the wing joint where Daenerys had often rested her saddleless seat. She leaned low, her body curving to the flex of massive cords beneath the hide. She whispered into the wind roaring past her ears, "East." And Drogon launched. A thunderclap burst of air flattened every banner. Ash erupted in a vortex as those black wings struck downward, and stone pavement imploded beneath the recoil of his launch. Arya jerked, clinging, yet some instinct. Perhaps wolf blood, perhaps the faceless stillness across years, kept her anchored. They rose. The Red Keep fell away. The city a whisper of ruins. The bay a molten mirror to sunset. Jon shouted her name, dwindling to grain beneath swirl of thermal currents. The Unsullied scattered as the eddies from Drogon's ascent sent them sprawling. Higher they climbed, past ruinous battlements, past the highest tower where spiders of cracked mortar still clung. The wind was cold, shockingly so after the furnace below, and Arya's eyes teared, but she would not blink. Not while the world unfolded in a tapestry of conquest and consequence beneath her. She saw the smoldering silhouette of King's Landing, blackened ribs of houses reaching like supplicants to a mother who would never answer. She saw the fields beyond, once green, now dust. She saw the King's Road thread northward, where her siblings awaited uncertain tidings. She saw water, so much water, shining pewter in early dusk, leading to horizons she had marked on childhood maps, but never truly believed she would cross. Drogon banked east, wings knifing through air that thundered across membranes the color of dying sunsets. Arya flattened to his neck, palms tucked beneath ridges as sharp as winter spires. She felt the rushing life of him, each heartbeat a drum that could drown an army, each breath a bellows forging terrible possibility. And yet the hatred she had feared within him was not there. Only grief, heavy as the sky. She closed her eyes and let that grief wash through her. She mouthed silent names. Her mother, her father, Robb, the Hound, Yoren, Gendry, wherever he sailed. The living and the dead braided into one unbroken cord that lashed her to purpose. When she opened them again, the western horizon had already fallen beyond sight. All that lay ahead was the moonlit mirror of the gullet. And beyond, the ragged gemstone islands of Essos. Stars began to kindle overhead like flares in a vault of unending black. Drogon's shadow glided along the sea, a dark continent traversing flickers of starlight. Hours unfurled in silence, broken only by wind and the low rumble of dragon breath. Arya's limbs numbed, her skin crusted with dried salt sweat and dragon heat. Her mind drifted but never slept. Dawn's first rose smoldered along the edge of the world when distant lights approached, fishing boats at the western lip of the stepstones. Drogon veered higher, skirting their meager flames. Fishermen looked up, mouths open, nets forgotten, as the night's last wonder passed overhead. By the time the sun cleared the horizon, they had left Westeros behind. A pale band of cloud obscured the water below, molten gold on top. And Arya felt a weight lift from her chest, which she had carried since first leaving Winterfell. She touched the warm scale before her again, almost gently, and realized the dragon had slowed, wings beating in languid arcs. He was exhausting even his vast reserves. She scanned the eastward sea. A scattering of rocky teeth broke the water. Islands too small to chart. Yet one broad crag sat higher, its crown forested, its slopes steep but shelved. She shifted her weight, tapped lightly twice upon his scale. "There," she said, though he needed no guidance, his own weariness already angled downward. Drogon wheeled in descending spiral. As he neared, she glimpsed terraces of tangled cedar, a waterfall flinging silver threads over basalt cliffs. Gulls startled into zigzagging panic. The island smelled of earth unburned by war. Perhaps it had never known a human foot. Drogon touched down within a clearing framed by sicket fronds. His landing shook ground and heart alike, but it was gentler than any Arya had felt from him in battle. He folded wings, chest heaving, steam rising from vents between scaled plates. Arya slid off, boots greeting moss-laden soil. For a moment she simply stood, legs trembling with borrowed exhaustion. A dawn wind stirred leaves, carrying scents of salt, sap, and something bright and sweet she could not name. A lark burst into song atop a stone cusp, unafraid of the dragon's bulk. Arya turned to Drogon. The dragon's head drooped, amber eyes half-lidded. She stepped close, laying her palm upon the warm curve of his cheek. "Rest," she murmured. She felt, in the deep thrumming of his life force, that he understood. He settled, coiling his massive body in a semicircle, wings cape-like around. His eyes closed. She surveyed their refuge, a natural amphitheater of basalt and fern. Water nearby in a clear pool fed by the waterfall. She was alone but not alone. She was still armored by purpose, but the battle's roar had ended. For the first time in moons, she inhaled air unsoured by grief's acrid smoke. And then, as a soft hush fell over island and sky, Arya Stark allowed her knees to bend. She sat in the moss, leaned against the horn-scaled shoulder of the last living dragon, and let the silence speak. Behind closed eyes unspooled memories of those lost, of those yet to confront her choices. But under it all, the wolf dream ran, vast forests boundless, northern snows whispering of home, and in the dream sky, a black shape swept free. She did not sleep. She drifted. She listened to Drogon's steady breathing. She felt the slow spread of dawn warmth across her face. Somewhere above, gulls cawed. Somewhere within, the echo of steel upon flesh still rang. Yet another sound emerged, quiet as seed sprout breaking earth. The possibility that this, too, might be a beginning. Hours later, when the sun had carried itself halfway to zenith, Arya rose. She explored the clearing's rim, found fruiting trees of unknown name, tasted their nectar, sweet and sharp, and filled her water skin at the pool. Drogon watched her through half-lidded eyes but did not stir. She returned to him, sat cross-legged, and drew a shallow circle in soft loam. In it, she marked 4 stones. Winterfell to the north, King's Landing to the south, Braavos far west, and a blank stone to the east, a waiting name. She studied them. She considered the path of a lone wolf across continents, the threat Westeros might yet pose if word of Daenerys' death reached those hungry for the dragon's flame. She considered the child of prophecy Jon Snow might still be, the Queen Sansa must become. Bran's watch in the Weirwood's dream. Her absence would carve a silence in each of their lives. But silence, she had learned, could shield, or it could smother. She must choose which. She stood, brushed soil from her palms, and walked to Drogon. She placed her hand to his head once more. His eye opened, a molten sun. She said only, "We go farther," because farther east lay lands both old and unspoiled. Shadowed ruins of Valyria's rival civilizations. Legends of shy princes in moss-grown courts. Traders who spoke tongues wetter with vowels than any she had heard. Farther east lay maps incomplete even in the Citadel. Seas where krakens warred with leviathans. And beyond all that, perhaps a place where dragons could brood eggs in peace, and a girl forged by grief could learn whether her shadow still held any light. Drogon lifted his head, scenting wind blowing from those uncharted quarters. His wings unfurled, shaking dew in silver arcs. He did not need saddle nor spur to know her desire. Their purposes, separate yet entwined, had aligned in the heat of ruin. He bent low, allowing her once more onto the bridge of his shoulders. She climbed, settling with a grip grown sure. No queen's command bound him now, only choice. They rose again, torrents of leaf and petal spiraling in their wake, above the waterfall's white roar, above the cedar crowns, above gulls wheeling wide. The island shrank, the world unfurled. Eastward, great clouds towered like white fortresses. The sun glinted across Drogon's wings, painting scarlet at the tips where fresh membrane replaced torn. Arya leaned forward, hair whipping. She felt the pull of the horizon like a bowstring drawn. She spoke once, not knowing if the dragon heard, but needing the words to exist in air. "No one," she said. In Bravosi accent or northern burr she could not tell. And everyone. Wolf, girl, assassin, sister. Each facet turned under new light. She smiled, teeth bared to wind. A stark smile. A survivor's. Drogon's roar broke over the sea, jubilant, mournful, immense. And together they arrowed into the dawn. where sky met water in an unbroken seam of possibility, where ash could not follow, and where the names they carried through fire might melt away to reveal whatever lay unburned beneath. The horizon swallowed them, and for a breathless moment, the wide world waited, unsure if it had lost a tyrant or gained something stranger still. Yet in their wake drifted only wind-shaken ash and the faintest echo of wings beating toward hope. K. Pandi Ai. A sea swell murmured beneath the dragon's shadow, rhythmically rising to kiss the scales of his belly before falling away in glittering commerce. Drogon skimmed so near the water that his wingtips cut twin furrows of white spray. Brendan's sailors called this corner of the summer sea the Mirror, but it was mirror no longer. Each stroke of those iron dark wings shattered dawn's reflection into prismatic shards that whirled and reformed behind him. Upon the cathedral broad neck, Arya Stark crouched low, forearms roped about a ridge of horn. The salt wind peeled tears from her eyes faster than she could blink them away, yet she stared forward without flinching. Hours of flight bled together, pearl gray just before sunrise. Then the lacquered rose of first light. Then a brilliance so ardent, the water looked as though someone had spilled molten silver across its face. Somewhere behind them lay the smoke-ruined spires of King's Landing, and the echo of a decision that would reverberate through thrones and graves alike. Ahead, nothing but horizon. She felt as if they soared between breaths of the world, one colossal exhale behind them, one colossal inhale waiting, suspended. Drogon's wings slowed, the cadence slipping from a war drum to a funeral bell. Even a creature such as he, bred to flame and tempest, carried mortal thresholds. Arya sensed the tired hitch in each beat, sensed the tremor running along the cords that anchored wing to spine. She patted the warm scale beneath her palm. "Easy," she murmured. Not command, merely acknowledgement. He banked a fraction northward, nose angling toward a thread of cloud that clung to the sea as though trying to mend earth to sky. Gradually the white braided into gray, gray into mist, mist into a shape, a knuckled backbone of rock wearing a crown of green. As Drogon descended, Arya glimpsed a single ruined tower jutting above the canopy, an islet fort left to barnacles and gull nests. Talons clanged upon stone. The landing jarred through Arya's bones, but she held, sliding down the curve of his shoulder to the herb-sweet air of the island. Knee-deep grass bent beneath the downdraft, recovering in waves after Drogon furled his wings. He sank on his haunches with a hiss like a forge cooling. Arya flexed numb fingers, feeling pins of sensation return. Salt crusted her hair at the temples, strands hung stiff as wire. She tugged the leather water skin from her belt, drank, then crouched to splash sea from a puddle over her face. When she looked up, Drogon's eyes glowed ember soft. He exhaled, steam, not flame, and lowered his head until it lay across an outcrop. "All right," Arya said. "I'll hunt." She palmed the hilt of needle, tested its familiar weight, then slipped into the tree line. The island's wood smelled of cedar and laurels, thick and wet. Branches tangled overhead, letting through columns of white sun shatter. She moved at a ranger's pace, measured, silent, senses unstrung to catch every bird scold, every leaf shiver. Each breath of unburnt earth reminded her of Winterfell's godswood. She half expected to see the carved heart tree face scowling through the foliage. Instead, she found goat trails, hoof prints in dented black loam, fresh. She followed them downslope until the canopy opened on a meadow soaked with violets. 10 feral goats grazed there, half feral anyway, scions perhaps of stock left by some long-dead garrison. She knocked an arrow, inhaled, timed the sway. When she loosed, the shaft carried a memory of Yoren's gruff lesson, of Angi's wry approval. Through the ribs, quick and sure. The goat dropped without bleat. Arya knelt beside the body, whispered, "Valor Morgulis." Then the answering, "Valor Dohaeris." She bound the legs, hefted it across her shoulders, and trekked back. Drogon lifted his head at her approach, flared one nostril, and uttered a questioning rumble. "Share," she said, though she doubted he understood the tongue so much as the parody of tone. She slit the goat's flank, opened the cavity, and dragged a haunch free to toss before him. A snack, nothing more. but better than flying on emptiness. Drogon snapped it up, patience surprising for so large a fury. The remainder she dressed for her own rations. Loin strips ash smoked over a twig fire, liver skewered and quick-seared in crackling fat. When she finished, she unrolled a scrap of oiled cloth from her satchel. Inside lay 3 small crystal flasks. Maester's tinctures pilfered from the Red Keep before it became a grave. Milk of the poppy, for wounds. Nightshade, for a quicker end should a moment ever come when she, or even stranger, Drogon, required mercy. The 3rd vial contained a clear liquor that tasted of pine and set her veins burning. Gendry had once called it moon white, a smith's remedy against exhaustion. Arya dabbed a drop beneath her tongue. Heat unfurled down her throat, radiating out to her fingertips. She touched Drogon's scales again. Sleep. He seemed of identical mind. Lids shuddered, breath lengthened, sides rising like bellows at rest. Arya stretched across grass, still flattened by his landing. Above, branches etched the sky in black lattice. She let her body cool, let the hum of cicadas lull the tension from her shoulders. Yet true sleep evaded her. Whenever her eyes closed, they filled with violet flame, with the arc of a dagger entering Daenerys' heart, with the sigh of a city giving way beneath dragonfire. She rolled onto her side, nose nearly touching Drogon's elbow. The scale's texture fascinated her, each plate rim cross-hatched, center smooth, transitioning from charcoal near his underside to a garnet sheen upon his dorsal crest. She traced one groove. The dragon twitched, not in irritation but in near feline acknowledgement. Wolves dreamed across leagues, perhaps dragons dreamed through touch. As the sun climbed its merciless arc, she drifted into half-wakefulness. Chased by a mild fever, the moonlight could not wholly disperse. She saw Nymeria in a flicker of green-gold dream, saw her pacing riverbanks far north, matron to a pack of myriad hues. Saw her pause, stare southward, ears pricked. Felt a question pulse along their tenuous tether. Pack? Home? Arya offered no answer. Only the sensation of sky beneath wings, of sea unrolling forever. Nymeria's tail flicked. The dream folded in upon itself. When she woke, afternoon had painted the water brass. Drogon still dozed. Arya rose, stretched, and paced the perimeter. On the southern lip of the islet fishtail clouds stacked like ramparts. Storm? Or no? Hard to reckon. Essosi weather wrote its own riddles. She scanned the ruin of the tower. It leaned inland, festooned by ivy robust enough to climb. On impulse, she scaled it, hand over hand up the stubborn vine mesh, until she stood atop a parapet, brittled by centuries of salt wind. Sea every direction, no sails. The nearest shore, if her charts were true, lay 200 leagues east, the Lorragon Peninsula, feeding Volantis' sphere of influence. Wolves had prowled the back alleys there centuries ago, if rumors of the old blood were believed. Between here and there, only water and unrecorded currents. The wind shifted. Arya caught it, acrid, almost metallic. Not lightning. Death. She looked down. Drogon had roused, neck angled skyward, nostrils flaring. He tasted the same scent. Something on the wind had died recently, and not by natural means. Arya scrambled down, heartbeat quickening. What is it? The dragon's hackles rose, spines clattering like shields in a rack. He loosed a low growl, throat pulsing with sub-audible bass. The scent reached her finally. Tallow, burnt rope, the iron-sweet tang of fresh blood. She jammed needle into its sheath and sprinted downslope toward the narrow strand that ringed half the islet. Drogon lumbered behind, the ground trembling under each pace. They broke the tree line onto a crescent beach littered with flotsam. Splintered crates, lengths of charred mast. A sodden sail still whispering some Lycene sigil. Bodies bobbed between rocks. Men in mail, lips blue, bellies bloated. No more than a score, yet enough to foster vultures. Among them drifted a single iron cage half submerged, door wrenched off by impact. Inside, 3 skeletons in shackles rattled with each wave slap. Arya knelt at a body that had washed nearer shore. blonde hair hewn short, pink wheels crisscrossing back and arms, lash marks. Slaver, and recently so. She rifled his belt, a Lacine captain's token etched with coiled fish. Course then, a slaver galley plying contraband north of the summer sea, caught by storm or rebelled crew, run afoul of reefs. Gods alone knew. Drogon stalked among the wreckage, sniffing deachery, his wings half opened, ready to torch any living threat. Arya climbed a tumble of barrels and boxes, scanning for survivors. A cough answered, weak, raspy. From behind a capsized launch, she vaulted down. A youth no older than Rickon lay face up on planks, wrists raw where chains had once been. He blinked at Arya, seeing perhaps only silhouette against sun. "Take me," he croaked in Valyrian, accent Taroshi. He lifted one hand and let it drop, too spent to plead. Arya poured him water, coaxed slow sips. Who were you to them? Cargo. A bitter curve of lip. Daughter of a spice factor reneged on debt. They took me as surety. Arya eased him upright. A livid gash furrowed his calf. Without quick salve it would suppurate. She whistled low. Drogon padded closer, head towering above. The boy's eyes widened in terror. He won't hurt you, Arya said, though certainty was borrowed. Drogon rarely harmed save by Daenerys' word, and Arya was not Daenerys. Yet dragons could be capricious. She laid one hand on a foreleg, thick as winter oak. Stop. Drogon stilled, jaws clamped, but flame flickered behind teeth. A compromise. She bandaged the boy's leg, feeling his tremors as she knotted cloth. He tried to speak again, perhaps thanks, perhaps fear, but fainted mid-word. She hoisted him into a half-intact coracle and dragged it beyond high tide mark. Stays till morning, she told Drogon. The dragon snorted steam. Night bled violet across water. Arya built a signal fire on the promontory near the tower. Stacked driftwood, doused in pitch from a smashed barrel. Drogon, sensing her intent, sniffed the pile, then sneezed a nub of flame. Wood caught in rushing whump, flushing the cliff face orange. The beacon's light carved the islet into an eye of brightness in a rim of endless dark. Hours passed. The rescued boy murmured through fever. Arya fed him goat broth, cooled his forehead, braced him when the shakes came. Drogon patrolled the perimeter, occasionally flapping to a vantage rock to roar defiance at gulls daring to approach. Each roar quivered the very air, yet Arya found comfort in it, like a distant cousin to a direwolf's howl claiming night. Toward dawn, a shadow teased the horizon, a squat, double-masted caravel, sails furled, oars backswept. It angled toward the beacon with cautious haste. Arya stirred the fire, raising plumes. Drogon crouched, hackles keening. The ship eased into the cove, anchors splashing. A skiff splintered water toward shore. 5 figures aboard. 4 rowers, 1 standing. Lantern raised. Arya greeted them at water's hem, needle displayed but lowered. The lantern-bearer hailed in Volantine. Arya answered inadequately. A handful gleaned from Bravos docks. The man's ears pricked at her accent. He switched to common with the drawl of a sea-free trader. "Fair evening. Beacon's costly. Wreck salvage? Claim to dispute?" His gaze flicked warily to Drogon, who watched from cliff top like a cathedral gargoyle. 7 hells, the trader murmured. "Color draining? No salvage to claim," Arya said. "Wreck belongs to the sea now. I've one survivor. Will you take him to Volantis and treat his wounds?" The trader's mouth worked. "We, of course. But the beast. He flies soon as sun's up. He won't trouble your ship so long as you leave by noon. Fate perhaps, or greed overcoming fear, spurred compliance. They offloaded a healer, pale woman smelling of camphor, who tended the boy with deft speed, binding gash, dosing poppy. Before hoisting him aboard the skiff, she pressed a small pouch of silver to Arya. "From my captain," she said. "A dragon's favor is cheap at 20 stags." Arya accepted only 2 coins, enough to purchase a deck cloak at next port. "Keep the rest for him." Sun spilled over the water like uncorked mead. Drogon launched skyward to circle once, suspicion cooling into indifference as the caravel pulled free of its moorings. The dragon descended near Arya, the gust of his landing snuffing what remained of the beacon. She secured satchel straps, checked weapon lanyards, climbed. They leapt east again, morning haze smearing shoreline until even the misery of the wreck dropped away. In King's Landing, 6 days after the throne room fell silent, Jon Snow stood before a bier built of cedar and myrtle. Upon it lay Daenerys Targaryen, hair-washed, wounds veiled beneath pale silk. The Septon officiating dared not speak her titles. Too many watching still tasted smoke in their lungs. But he read from a scroll of Valyrian rites with patched-in segments of the faith, a compromise hammered out at dawn. Torchlight danced across faces gathered in semicircle. Tyrion, wrists still shackled. Davos and Brienne squared at parade rest. Sansa in twilight, wolf gray, expression cloaked behind courtesy. Beyond them, sulking in clumps, stood what remained of the Unsullied, commanderless since Grey Worm's collapse, refusing disbandment, refusing any home soil save Nath. Jon scarcely heard the rites. He saw Arya in every flicker of flame, saw the angle of her shoulders when she'd mounted Drogon, saw her vanish into clouds, felt the emptiness she left behind like marrow sucked from bone. If he closed his eyes, he could not decide whether Daenerys' death was murder or mercy, burden or release. He could only see streets paved with ashen children, sobbing where mothers had once been. Ghost paced behind him, muzzle brushing his knuckles. When the rites ended, 4 Unsullied lifted the bier and bore it beyond the city walls to the blackened plain where fire pits still smoked. There they built a pyre, cedar, pine, wild lavender. Jon placed Daenerys' coronet up the shroud. Tender blue stones winked. No one else stepped forward. He did not ask why. Grief was raw for allies and enemies alike. Tyrion came last, limping. She meant, he said, voice little more than reed wind, to break the world to fit the shape she'd been promised. Perhaps none of us could have resisted such a prophecy. He swallowed the rest. Guards drew him back to his cell. Trial deferred until the realm decided if realm still remained. Sansa joined Jon at the pyre's edge. Ash moat snowed between them. When Bran's ravens sighted Drogon east of the stepstones, they counted only 1 rider. Jon's reply formed on a sigh. Arya has always walked roads no one else sees. Will she return? Ghost growled soft, nose tilting to wind. Jon followed the direwolf's gaze southward, where the sea grumbled against breakwaters. At water's edge lay one massive claw print hardened into glass where Drogon's flame had fused sand. It looked less like an imprint than a sigil. I don't know, he said, but she will not fly back for trials or coronations. Sansa's lips pressed thin. Then she's wiser than either of us. The pyre ignited under Davos' torch. Flame traveled slow up lavender garlands, kissed silk, took hold. When the heat forced Jon back a step, Ghost withdrew beside him, white fur gilded gold. The scent of burning cedar mingled with dragonfire memories, until Jon could no longer discern where past ended and morning began. Beyond the summer sea, Arya and Drogon rode currents lofting inland. Days blurred into tapestry, thunderstorms bursting over them like kettle drums. Nights spent perched on stony Kasbah ridges watching fields of noctilucent plankton pulse phosphorescent in far bays. Once, a sky so riddled with meteors that Drogon's roar seemed a chorus line to falling stars. They crossed the Isle of Cedars, where old Valyrian watchtowers punched from mangrove jungles like Titan's ribs. Arya explored one tower's base, deciphering faded mosaics of dragon lords entwined with priestesses of some forgotten river cult. Symbols half recognized, all seer motifs echoing the House of Black and White, sent a shiver spidering across her back. She lit no torches deeper than the antechamber. Some dreams were better left tile-bound. Supplies dwindled. Twice she risked markets. First at Talasea, coastal hamlet owing ties to Volantis. Second at the Outrider Bazaar of Mantares, where disease smoldered perpetual. Cloaked and hooded, she traded silver for goat jerky, waxed canvas, a steel mirror no bigger than a sparrow's wing. When a Mantarian slaver prodded Drogon's chainless ankle with a rust hook, Arya broke his wrist with a stone pestle before the slaver even finished the word, leash. Mantaris magistrate later posted a warning along the quays. Dragon and wolf, pass in peace or perish. No one tested its truth. Farther east stretched the disputed lands, rolling grass broken by war, every third generation, but currently lying fallow beneath columns of dragon-struck firecloud. Villagers here eyed Drogon as omen rather than threat. They left offerings of ox meat outside hamlets, bribes for calm skies. Arya accepted one haunch, distributed the rest among stray dogs. She asked no shelter, left no names. At dusk of their 13th day beyond the wreck, a salt marsh opened beneath them, steaming like soup in twilight. Drogon circled, unsettled. Sulfur reek braided the air. From above, the swamp resembled a tarnished mirror etched by luminous veins. Channels of pale green, phosphor bright. Trees knelt half dissolved by acid. Arya's nose burned. Then she saw the bones. Dragon bones strewn across muck, rib cages the size of merchant galleys, skulls partially iced over with crystal salts. Valyrian graves, maybe, or the skeletons of wyverns rumored to haunt these wastes. Drogon's pupils narrowed to slits. An almost mournful rumble reverberated into Arya's spine. She leaned forward, palms settling on the curve behind his eye. "Not here," she agreed. Fearless did not mean foolish. They climbed west again until miasma faded. Night swallowed them. Arya dozed in the saddleless depression along Drogon's scapular ridge, trusting reflex to keep her anchored. She dreamed of the House of Black and White's pool room. Faces pressed like autumn leaves against marble walls, each visage silently mouthing her name. She gave none of them breath, but when she turned, her father's head graced the wall. Eyes closed as in sleep. "Tell me," Ned Stark whispered. "What name will they carve upon your stone?" She could not answer. She jerked awake, heart stuttering, and realized dawn flushed the horizon. Drogon banked toward a delta fractured by countless isles, ribbons of river water splitting brown from jade. Smoke rose from mud brick villages. Fishing skiffs dotted channels like water beetles. A broad island loomed, larger than most, dominated by a limestone spine curving north-south. At its midpoint stood a stone citadel in disrepair yet still manned. Banners of dull carmine hung along parapets. Tapestries below depicted a black manticore crest. Arya recognized it from whispered lore. Carthenian outposts left over from the Spice Wars. But these banners bore a variant, mandibles outstretched around a stylized crown. New warlord, perhaps. Drogon hissed, wings tilting. Arya saw why. Wooden pylons along the riverbank mounted ballistae, not crude but city-forged torsion engines. Against wyverns perhaps, but any dragon in range was target deified. They swept lower, still out of bolt reach, but two lines of shops evacuated onto docks. Archers knocking fire-rishad arrows. Arya rose on her knees, balancing against Drogon's pitch. She signed a gesture the faceless men used to parley. 2 fingers across heart, extended outward. Archers hesitated but did not lower. Warned then, she thought. She tapped Drogon's neck. He understood. Flame gouted just long enough to char air above one ballista. Wood blackened, but no bolt loosed. A message: we could, but we won't, if. They climbed again, leaving island chain behind. Arrowheads glimmered until distance turned them to stars that fell behind horizon. On the wings shadowed lee side, Arya sighed raggedly. War, everywhere. Had Daenerys been right, that only purging flame could break such circles. Yet circles made from blood never sever. They just paint new arcs. She pressed forehead to scale, seeking answers in the rhythmic warmth of Drogon's pulse. None arrived. Back west, Tyrion Lannister's cell door squealed open. Brienne entered, helm under arm. Candlelight guttered on steel. "They've decided," she said. "You sound like I should be sharpening my neck," Tyrion replied. "You'll speak at the dragon pit. Public spectacle? Delightful." He rose with ironic flourish, chains clinking. "Who gathered this tribunal?" "A quorum of crows. Lords deferring to no crown yet," Brienne answered. They name themselves stewards of the realm, until a council elects. A puff of resignation. They won't hold long. Every house north of the Reach has its own claimant. Pensionings. She escorted him through corridors smelling of limewash and old grief. Atop the stairs, they emerged into the yawning ruination of the dragon pit. Sunlight pierced roof gaps, throwing slatted bars across assembled nobility. Tyrion scanned quick. Samwell Tarly, Edmure Tully, Gendry Baratheon dwarfed by Lady Yara, Prince Trystane Martell, and sown among them new-minted free company captains representing the Unsullied and Dothraki remnants. Stark siblings anchored one side. Jon Dower, Sansa inscrutable, Bran's eyes half-veiled beneath lashes like frost. Gendry raised a battered helm in greeting, the boy still unused to lordship. Near him, Davos offered a nod that said, "I warned you, politics would kill more than war." Tyrion cleared his throat. A hush rippled. "I stand accused of abetting the Dragon Queen's claim," he began. "And perhaps, by neglect, abetting her fall." He folded, shackled hands. "I offer counsel still. Choose your next ruler not by birthright, for birth leads only back to this pit. Choose by worth, and by willingness to break this wheel without burning the spokes." He inhaled, aware each word shaped knives. "I nominate Jon Snow." A low murmur rippled. "A man who does not want power, and thus least likely to abuse it." Jon's jaw tightened. Before he could answer, Sansa stepped forward. "My brother is of the north," she said. "He has sworn to defend Winterfell, and his heart lies in the snow. The north begs leave to rule itself." Yara Greyjoy barked a laugh. 7 bloody kingdoms again. Why not 8? I've a mind for the Iron Islands to chart their own tide. Nanyam. Arguments erupted. Yara versus Gendry. Edmure launching nervous claims. Sam proposing counsels. Tyrion watched the collision of dreams. Wondered how many would fracture before forging compromise. In the lull, Bran Stark's voice threaded through. Soft, unblinking. "What of the one riding a dragon still?" Silence. Bran's gaze drifted cloudward, as if seeing rapids of time no other eye could follow. "My sister flies beyond reach. Yet a dragon rider is power. And power neglected becomes threat." He lowered his gaze to Jon. "Find her. Speak to her. Broker peace before others choose war." Menmisolvolker. Jon's chest felt suddenly too small. Ghost pressed flank to shin as if offering warmth for the path. Jon met Tyrion's stare. An echo of plea. Tyrion merely inclined his head. As ever, debt owed. South of the Jade Gates, the world tasted of cinnamon and rot. Monsoon clouds, black-bellied, stamped along the horizon as Drogon glided over estuary flats laced by gleaming tributaries. On a spit of land shaped like a broken spear stood a lighthouse. 5-tiered pagoda. Lantern chamber glowing amber, though sun had not yet set. Ships jostled below. Harbor of the free city Jagos and Arya learned from a trio of fishermen who'd shrieked and prostrated when Drogon cast shadow on their nets. She guided the dragon to an abandoned parapet outside town. Unhitched the satchel, cloaks, flasks. Bade Drogon stay hidden. At least as hidden as a mountain of scale could tuck behind crenellations. He rumbled disapproval, but folded wings. Within the harbor district, scents jostled. Sea brine, fried squid, turmeric, sweat. Arya kept her hood tilted, seeking markets for salted meat, flint, and, if luck permitted, scrolls charting the Shadowlands. But a commotion halted her. A procession clogging the main thoroughfare. Porters bearing palanquins draped in azure silk. Ahead, soldiers in lacquered iron beat slender bronze gongs. On the foremost palanquin reclined a woman with hair the color of jet mussel shell, gown sleeved in cloth of silver. Her eyes, impossibly, were pale as untrodden snow. They trained unerringly on Arya, though 100 faces pressed between. The woman raised a finger. The procession halted. 2 soldiers parted crowd, approached Arya. "Honored Magister bids you speak," one said in lilting Kiskari. Arya considered refusal, then curiosity answered. She followed, ducked beneath palanquin's awning. Inside, cushions plush enough to swallow ankles. The woman regarded her without expression. Close. Her eyes shimmered almost violet. "You travel with a dragon," she said in flawless common. Not question, but inevitability. I felt his shadow crest the harbor. Arya's throat dried. She clutched the satchel strap. "Who are you?" "A pilgrim only." An amused half-smile. "Call me Kimia." I trace bloodlines lost. Fingers like porcelain arranged the air. I would meet the last living child of Balerion. Arya flexed. "And chain him?" "I carry no chains." She tilted her head. "Nor illusions. Many will hunt you." She pulled a scroll from beneath cushions. "I bear a charter from the Council of 13 in Korth. They propose refuge." The scroll wax bore twin dragons intertwined. "Official. Safe harbor for you and your mount in exchange for exhibitions. Nothing more than a flight above the port once each moon. Consider it festival." Arya almost laughed. "Like a dancing bear." "Dragons do not dance," Kimia corrected softly. "They inspire awe that stabilizes markets, quiets uprisings. But they need room to nest. Korth offers the Garden of July. 3 square miles of hot springs walled since the Pearl Wars. Yours to roam, no ballistae." Her eyes glinted. "No slaver galleys." Arya remembered bones bleaching in swamp mists. Remembered ballistae along the river fortress. A walled garden sounded too akin to gilded cage. Yet Drogon deserved a place to rest, to heal. She accepted the scroll, tucking it unread. "I'll reply after council." Kimia bowed from the waist. "The council winter in Carcosa. Send word by Raven, any city ports to them." A pause. "But hurry. Mirren the Butcher Knight has sailed with 9 wyverns netted from Sothorios. He believes your dragon's flame will temper their unruly breeding." The palanquin jerked as procession resumed. Mirren does not ask permission. Arya slipped into crowd noise. Wyverns could not exhale fire, but their claws carried venom said to melt steel. 9 against 1. She hurried back to Drogon, mind-mapping sea lanes. North around Lanus, then east across the Jade Sea, hugging storm belts couched by Carcosan latitude. A fortnight's flight if winds held. Drogon paced clifftop, agitation already seething. Arya read the tension. He'd caught wyvern musk on the wind. She stroked his muzzle. "We move." They launched into dusk, stars embroidering themselves one by one until sky resembled Nymeria's pupil. Dark, unblinking, flecked with silver. Arya guided Drogon along a diagonal course less traveled by traders but favored by migratory gull flocks, where winds curled steady. Hours later, pale flames flickered on horizon behind. Perhaps lighthouse, perhaps sails ablaze. She did not look back. High in the stratosphere, cold enough to bite tears into crystals, she pressed cheek to scales radiating faint warmth. For a fleeting moment, she wished for Sansa's counsel, Joan's steadfast hush, Bran's vision. But she had chosen exile of her own forging. In the hush between wing beats, she whispered names. Valar Morghulis, Valar Dohaeris, until the words dissolved into breath. She would serve, yes, but to living somewhere beyond throne. She would live as no one, and in that living discover what face might emerge once all debts paid. Miles below, black water rolled east under an indifferent moon. She studied its vastness, felt both infinitesimal and immense. Somewhere invisible, wyverns rode drafts hunting for brothers. Somewhere, councils argued over crowns. Somewhere, a white direwolf lifted snout to drifting ash and howled. In the merging of all those somewheres, Arya Stark of Winterfell ceased to be a girl defined by losses. She became instead horizon-given flesh, ever retreating, ever drawing nearer. She tightened her grip, eyes fixed on dawn's faint ember building beyond world's rim. It would be a long chase. An entire life, perhaps. And she was finally ready for its hours. Anike. Kanamenche. Wind like hammered glass whistled against the backswept horns crowning Drogon's skull, raw and high, where the air thinned to a taste of iron. With each mile that slid beneath his ribs, the world lost more of the maps Arya once studied by candlelight in Winterfell's library. No maester's vellum charted the way east of Korath with any certainty. The seas between Carcosa and the Shadowlands were rumors stitched to fear. Yet she had never felt a road more certain beneath her feet, or now, her knees, than the jet-black arch of this dragon's spine. They flew by night to spare Drogon the scald of midday suns. Even the high dark the air rose warm off the Jade Sea, smelling of salt spiced with unseen blossoms, wafting from archipelagos lurking far below. Sometimes she glimpsed their lantern dots, pearl necklaces draped across water, only to watch them vanish behind shreds of cloud that gleamed faintly with starlight. Once she thought she saw another fire in the sky, an ember streaking westward so fast it seared a green tail across the night. She told herself it was a falling star, not a wyvern, though the shape of its arc worried the corners of her mind. When blackness began to gray, she searched the horizon for safe perch. At last a crescent of cliffs emerged, volcanic rock bitten away into towering arches by centuries of surf. The tallest arch framed a lagoon the color of tarnished bronze. Drogon swept over once, talons grazing the spray, then wheeled back to settle on a ledge where sun would reach him late. The stone was warm already. He folded himself down, exhaling steam that gusted through the chiseled window of the arch, and startled a cloud of white gulls into spinning, screeching vortices. Arya dismounted stiff-legged. She unbuckled the leather pad she had rigged against the harshest points of his back, and stretched until vertebrae popped. One by one she checked her gear, needle still sheathed across the small of her back. The Valyrian dagger tucked under her arm, the short bow lashed to Drogon's flank. 2 flights of arrows left, not enough if wyverns hunted. She would need more before they reached an edge of the world where arrows no longer mattered. The lagoon's water shimmered metallic. She knelt at its edge, cupped a handful, sniffed. Brackish, but less saline than open sea. Safe enough with boiling. She drank sparingly, saving the skin's better water for Drogon should he wake thirsty. He twitched in restless half-dreams, wings shivering. Flying all night bent even his great will. She ran a hand along the tender seam where scar tissue from the scorpion bolt had knitted pale and glossy. It irritated him in damp weather. She murmured some nonsense in the old speech of Winterfell. Sounds of wind over snow, hoping the cadence soothed. The smell of fruit drifted down the cliffs. Something overripe, sweet rot. She followed it uphill and found a grove of trees braided together, as if grown from the same mother root. Fat pods dangled, bursting along seams to reveal crimson pulp crawling with sugar ants. She peeled one, sniffed, tasted. Tart, not poison. The ants made no difference once the fruit met her tongue. She filled her satchel with 12 pods, already scheming how to dry the flesh into leather strips for flight rations. A crack like distant thunder rolled across the dawn. She spun, hand to dagger, but the sound repeated. A boom followed by gull shrieks, then silence. Not thunder. Cannon? She had heard Braavosi merchants talk of Myrish galleys, mounting dragon powder tubes. Yet no ship lurked in the lagoon's throat. She scanned open water and found only a low fog bank to the south, its edge curling like smoke. On instinct, she dropped into shadow behind a boulder and watched. The fog bank bulged, developed wings of shadow. A shape burst free, sleek, sinewy, half the length of Drogon but swift as an arrow. A wyvern. Its hide glimmered wet green, eyes dusk gold. Another shape followed, then a third. 9, Kimia had warned, netted in Sithorios and broken to Myron's saddle. 9 horrors, bred in jungle canyons where men were meat. Arya ducked lower. The wyverns peeled in different directions, searching currents. None yet angled for the lagoon. The cliffs concealed Drogon's resting spot well enough. She crept back through the grove and slid down scree until she reached the dragon's side. He sensed her urgency, eyes flickering open into molten crescents. She laid both palms upon the warm plates of his muzzle. 9, she whispered. They're near. His pupils contracted into slits sharp as twin swords. She felt muscles flex under scale. The wing nearest her opened a handspan, collapsed again. He was spent from the night's run. Could he rise again and outfly all 9? Doubt gnawed, but staying promised worse. Another boom echoed. Closer. She peered over the lip of stone. A wyvern swooped past the arch, jaws snapping at a gull mid-air. The bird vanished in a mist of feathers. The wyvern shrieked triumph. Drogon growled low in his chest. The wyvern banked, sniffing. It caught the scent of dragon. Arya pivoted to the bow, slapped quiver string loose, knocked. The wyvern arrowed straight for her alcove. She fired once. Shaft clanged off a ridged snout. The beast jerked sideways, scraping the cliff with leathern wings. In the same instant, Drogon surged upward, his roar exploding the dawn. The force of it blew Arya's hair back and shook dust from seams in the rock. The wyvern wheeled, vomited a spray of black ichor from gland behind its teeth. A venomous spittle. Drogon recoiled, but the droplets spattered only stone. His chest inflated. He spewed a cone of fire so wide it filled the arch, charring everything inside the wyvern's outline. The smaller beast screamed, lost lift, spiraled down into the lagoon, where steam hissed from its corpse. Silence lasted perhaps 3 breaths. Then every shadow on the horizon turned toward the roar. Drogon was already crouching so Arya could mount. She leapt, clung. He sprang off the ledge, wings beating once, twice, hurling them over the lagoon's mouth. Ahead, 7 wyverns advanced in ragged line, with one more circling high as overwatch. Riders straddled their shoulders, lean silhouettes clutching hooked spears and braided reins of chain. Mirren's free company wore patchwork mail. Some bore half-helm masks hammered into grinning ape faces. One rider flung a net woven of shimmering steel. Arya ducked. The net clipped Drogon's wingtip, tore membrane. He faltered, but did not fall. "Burn," she said into the gale, and Drogon obeyed. He drove at the riders, exhaling another blistering torrent. One wyvern folded under the blast, rider shriveling. 2 others scattered upward and outward, spitting venom that sizzled in hot clouds. The sky filled with the stench of roasted flesh and acid tang. Arya's arms shook from wind shear. She drew the Valyrian dagger, though what use against sky predators? Still, courage sometimes resided in a clenched fist. Drogon rolled left, then dove, letting 3 wyverns overfly. He shot up through their underbellies. Talons raked one open throat to gut. Coils of intestine streamed crimson ribbons. Another wyvern latched onto Drogon's right wing, jaws crunching scale. Drogon screamed, an ear-splitting dirge, and barrel rolled, shaking the parasite loose. Arya's vision tunneled. She clung by one arm, adrenaline yanking muscles beyond thought. The dangling wyvern lost grip, but its rider hurled a barbed chain that wrapped Drogon's foreleg. Acid seeped from the barbs, gnawing at scales. Arya crawled forward against Gale, drew needle, and hacked at nearest chain link. Sparks flew. The metal was thicker than tent peg. She switched the dagger to left hand and sawed. Valyrian steel bit deeper. The chain snapped. She kicked the piece free. It tumbled into sky. 2 wyverns remained unscathed, plus the sentinel aloft. They regrouped beyond flamethrow. Source riders shouted coordination. Drogon's breath came in harsh blasts. The earlier tear widened each time he flexed his right wing, blood misting. He could still burn, but strength waned. Arya weighed risk. Fight to finish or break contact. She scanned earth below. A quilt of reefs knifing up to skewer careless wings. An idea sparked. She tapped Drogon's neck, then pointed down. He tugged and plummeted. The wyverns dove in pursuit. The nearest spat venom. Droplets sizzled on Drogon's tail. Arya hugged close, tasted salt and copper. Wind howled louder until her ears rang empty, but she kept eyes on the jagged reef spines leaping to meet them. Rock stacks pocked with tide pools. Razor narrow channels where water foamed furious. "Now," she hissed. Drogon spread wings at the last instant. Skimming channel throat. Wyverns behind copied but lacked his span. One clipped a fin against stone, crashed in thunder of bone and wave. Another tried to bank and struck reef pinnacle chest first. Only 2 survived the gauntlet. The sentinel, still high, and one scarred green whose rider screamed curses that rippled across water. Arya twisted, loosing an arrow. The shot vanished into nothing. She had counted wrong. Wind gusts burst between stacks, slapping arrow into surf. She cursed. The pursuing wyvern gained. Drogon swung out to sea, banking into sunrise glare. He climbed until their shadows shrank. Scarred Green kept chase but gained little. Sentinel wyvern stooped like a hawk from above. Arya sensed convergence. She climbed to Drogon's shoulder ridge, braced on haunch joint. Another arrow, this time aimed at rider, not beast. She inhaled, held until wind rhythm matched heartbeat, loosed. The arrow flew true, punched through throat where mail parted beneath gorget. The rider toppled, unmanned. Sentinel wyvern veered wildly, clipping Scarred Green. The two collided midair, wings tangling. Drogon pulled vertical. The sky filled with flailing claws. Arya swore and flung herself flush to scale as beast bodies rolled past, screeching, plummeting to ocean where twin geysers of foam erupted. Silence fell, but for Drogon's labored respiration. No more shadows in pursuit. Arya looked back. Nothing moved above the reef labyrinth but gulls wheeling around blood bloom. She crawled to neck crease, laid cheek to scale. Ain't enough. Drogon huffed agreement. They banked northwest, seeking the lee side of some island where fresh water pooled sweet. Arya listened to his heartbeat, steady but taxed. She whispered old prayers half remembered from the winter town sept, from the quiet hours when her mother's hand brushed hair from her brow. She did not know if any god heard such collisions of north and dragon, but the words soothed her just the same. By dusk Drogon spotted a long sandbar draped in pandanus trees. He landed without protest, immediately stalking to tideline to drink brine-kissed shallows. Arya slid down stiffly, legs trembling so badly she sat hard on warm sand. She opened her palms. Blood not her own ran in lines across lifeline grooves, the barbed chain's residue, burning where it touched. She rinsed in seawater, hissed through teeth, then applied salve. She had one dose left. Salves dwindle like arrows. Drogon hissed too. Acid pits marred the inner curve of his foreleg. Scale-eaten translucent at edges. She packed the wound with moss mixed to paste and whispered thanks when he allowed it. They camped in hollow where beach met low dune. Arya built a fire in trench fashion, shielding flame from open sea. She roasted strips of wyvern meat she'd cut from Scarred Green after the crash, blackish flesh that smelled half reptile, half pork. Drogon would not touch it. Dragons did not eat their lesser cousins. She ate in silence, ignoring the tang of venom cooked off. Night laid quilt of stars. Ares and the messenger and the spear tilted unfamiliar by this latitude. She found the sword-shaped pattern Rob once called Icy's Echo, and anchored herself there, tracing memory, refusing to drift. Somewhere beyond the dark lay Carthel's garden promise. Somewhere else, Myron himself would realize 9 had become none. But men who rode wyverns did not cease with one defeat. They bred fresh broods and came again. The dragonbone of Balerion cried out for eggs, for new kin to answer world's threats. One dragon alone was vulnerability. Arya studied Drogon's profile against the fire glow. Asleep, he looked carved from basalt, too grand to touch. Yet beneath stone, blood beat, wounds bled, fatigue grew. If she could find a clutch of eggs, rumors placed them in the smoking ruins of Valyria, in the hordes of Ashai. Even buried under temples in far Kayakayanaya, Drogon might guard them, or she might seek them herself. But eggs required heat, magic, lineage. She possessed none of those arts. Still, the idea refused to leave. Multiply dragons to end dragon hunters. She slept little. When pre-dawn gray washed sand, she sat cross-legged by dying coals and enumerated options. Continue to Carcosa, weigh Carth's bargain, gather intelligence on Myrina's holdings while Drogon recovered. Or veer southward into the smoking sea, gamble on myth, and return to Westeros, never. The second path promised independence, but at cost of unknown hungers. The first placed her inside gardens walled by men who valued dragons as spectacle. Yet walls cut both ways. They might keep wyverns out while Drogon healed. She rose, paced. Drogon cracked an eyelid. Carcosa first, she said aloud. If trap, we burn out. He exhaled a warm gust that rustled her hair. They took wing again. choosing cloud cover where possible. No wyvern shapes marred the sky. The wound on Drogon's foreleg wept, but did not smell of rot. When sun climbed vertical, distant coastline emerged. Cliffs violet in haze, crenellated with basalt towers. The city of Carcosa and the Garden of Gilai slumbered behind those purple stones. Approach revealed circles of white plume curling above courtyard chimneys. Hot springs indeed. Outer walls rose 50 feet, based in pale jade green stone that shimmered under glazing, etched with glyphs too stylized to parse. Gatehouses flanked by statues of 6 armed goddesses dwarfed even Drogon's shoulders. As they drifted overhead, horns sounded, not alarm, but a greeting roll. Right pennants of Chemia's family standard. The snow-pale eyes over a Chalcedony star flowered along ramparts. Arya guided Drogon to central plaza of the garden. Steam draped everything in translucent banners. Stone pools terraced down into darkness where mineral-stained edges cerulean. Lush ferns hung heavy with dew. The air smelled of warm salt and orchid nectar. Humid but clean, like the breath of earth itself. Chemia waited on a bridge arcing over the largest spring, flanked by attendants in lacquer hats. She bowed from waist. Attendants scattered rose blooms that hissed where they touched water. Arya stayed mounted, scanning vantage points for crossbows. She saw none, not even towers within easy shot. Perhaps trust, perhaps arrogance. She slid down. "Welcome," Chemia said. "Our healers wait." Arya's eyes flicked. 4 men in white robes bowed, carrying clay jars and long hooked implements of bronze. Drogon reared slightly. She raised a palm. To Chemia she said, "He dislikes strangers. We will treat him while you watch. No chains." She stepped aside, bidding healers approach. They moved like dancers. Slow, deliberate, always keeping clear lines for retreat. Drogon allowed them near. They cleaned the acid pit with salt water, smeared a salve red as garnet, then wrapped the limb in linen soaked in the same paste. Drogon rumbled tolerance. They stitched new membrane where wing had torn, binding edges with silk thread, rumored spun by Carcosan spiders. Arya counted her breaths, ready to intervene. None needed. When they finished, Chemia gestured toward a colonnade, glistening with condensation. "Your rooms." Arya followed. Steam left her hair curling into wild shapes. Along walls opened alcoves hosting couches of blue leather, low tables of glass-speckled lava rock. Within one alcove a basin of milk water rippled, perfumed with something like lilac. Chemia waved servants off and sat cross-legged on a woven mat. She patted space opposite. "I imagine you distrust hospitality," she began. "Wise of me to live this long," Arya said. "Then trade trust in pieces." Chemia produced a scroll bundle. Inside lay maps, etched copper sheets, intricate. Routes of wyvern raiders, Myron's feeding stations. Locations of rookeries where he breeds new clutches. Arya unrolled one sheet over her knees. Rivers, coordinates, glyph code, for troop counts. "Why give me this?" "Because a free dragon disrupts Myron's empire. Because Karth prospers when his tithes falter." She sipped tea from a squat cup. "Because, perhaps I admire a girl who toppled a queen then stole the queen's flame." "Admire?" Arya nearly laughed. "You don't even know me." Chemia's pale eyes glittered. "I know the shape of people by the gap they cut from history. Yours is clean, purposeful." Arya thought of the bodies she'd left in gaps. Trant, Phrase, Littlefinger, Daenerys. Clean was not a word she would choose. She traced Mirren's root lines with fingertip. "Hell come once he learns I'm here. Then we set a snare." Chemia produced a second item, a curved horn carved with sigils. "Mourning horn of the old empires. Legend says wyverns grow docile hearing its pitch, docile enough for capture nets." Her smile lacked warmth. "I never believed, but Myron does. If he learns the horn is here, he will risk assaulting our walls." "Them, which burns your rival and tests my dragon," Arya finished. "Strategic harmony." Kimia bowed head. You are free to refuse. Arya studied copper map again. One mark near a coastline delta intrigued her, a rookery labeled Wraith Cairn. He keeps eggs there? Kimia nodded. 16, taken this season. 3 hardening. She spoke the term with connoisseur's relish. Wyvern shell thickens into stone. Hatchlings must be chiseled free. Arya's pulse quickened. Eggs? Yes, but wyvern, not dragon. Still, nature crossed once might cross again. Legend told of fireworms siring with drakes when moons turned red. Was it folly to think Drogon's seed might kindle dragons even in wyvern shell? She tucked the thought aside. I accept garden sanctuary until he comes, she said. But if he breaks walls, I will kill him, then leave. No performances. Kimia's lips curved. I require none. They sealed a cord with poured tea. Kimia's cup brimming first, Arya's second, as custom of guest kingdom dictated. Arya hardly tasted some hibiscus note underlying smoke. For a fortnight Drogon rested. Steam and mineral mud eased his wound. He watched mist-coated macaques steal fruit from orchard limbs, but made no move to hunt them, content with carcasses delivered each sunset. Oxen, boars, once even a small whale carved into slabs that filled 3 wagons. Arya spent daylight hours practicing forms atop a pillar overlooking hot springs. Braavosi water dance with needle, silent stepping with dagger, breathing exercises from the assassin's temple. At night she pored over copper maps, committing every inlet and ridge to memory. On the 11th dawn ravens arrived from Korth. Sleek birds with violet beaks, bred for distance. One landed on Arya's outstretched arm, clawing into leather bracer. The cylinder around its ankle bore Myron's seal cracked. Message inside. July garden walls crumble soon. Surrender dragon to rightful master, and find mercy. Ink still wet. The bird must have flown direct. Arya took the scroll to Kimia. The Magister glanced once, tossed it into pool where ink mottled Noki. He is closer than we thought. She led Arya to parapet walkway. Beyond garden's outer wall stretched marsh flats cut by causeway. In haze moved shapes, Siga towers rolling on wooden wheels, ballistae escorted by cavalry. Banners black on scarlet, wyvern skull impaled on halberd. Mirren's host. Horn blasts sounded along the fortress. Carcassonne guards in scale cuirasses marshaled along battlements. Kimia's jaw worked, measuring. Too swift for full muster. He bypassed the trading road. Arya gauged distance, 1.5 leagues. Drogon could scorch towers before they nested crossbows, but not if nets entangled him. The horn? She asked. In vault under the east baths. Make sure Mirren hears where. Kimia's eyebrow rose. Decoy. Tempt him inside, Arya said. Walls hinder my flight. Better to strike while his forces choke the causeway. Kimia strode off shouting orders in twin languages. Brass gongs sang. Soldiers hauled tar kettles to parapets. Through steam rising like 1,000 ghosts, Arya hurried to Drogon. He loomed above the spring where lilies floated. At her approach he lifted head, scenting battle. She saddled the harness she'd fashioned, simple loop braided of camel hide across shoulders, and cinched tight. She strapped the quiver and bowed to her back, the dagger at belt, needle front. One more, she murmured into a granite ear ridge. Then rest for moons. He unfolded wings, steam swirling across membranes. Guards on wall ceased awe to gape. One stumbled backward into pool fully armored, vanished with splash and oath. They shot over battlements. The host below reacted with frantic trumpet calls. A ragged cheer rose among Carcossans. Drogon angled for the siege towers. Arya counted 4, each bristled with soldiers bearing barbed nets glinting silver. She felt a tug of memory, Grey Worm's blood on her hands. She clenched teeth. Drogon opened his furnace. Flames streamed like molten dawn onto foremost tower. Wood dried by sun for generations erupted. Soldiers leapt, shrieking, into reed marsh only to find ground unstable. They sank thigh-deep, heat blistering. Arrows arced upward in panic salvo. Most bounced off scale, one grazed Arya's shoulder, slicing cloth. She scarcely felt sting. Second tower's crew managed to hoist net between masts. Drogon veered hard, but net grazed wingtip, snagged. The weight yanked them in mid-turn. Arya drew dagger and sawed at rope where it twisted to steel ring. A javelin thunked into harness strap beside her thigh. She jerked free. Drogon snapped foreleg. The wing roared forward. Net split, trailing sparks. Below, Mirren himself rode a black destrier along causeway. He wore gilded scale, helm cast in demonic grin. When Drogon crested, Mirren raised gauntlet. A horn sounded, low, thrumming, unnatural. Not the morning horn, but something deeper. From behind Marshburn 9 wyverns launched, the same number Arya had slain. No, smaller. Juveniles hatched since. Their undersides bore paint lines of squad designation. Each carried 2 riders, 1 reins, 1 harpooner hefting canister-tipped shafts. They burst apart like seeds in wind, flanking arcs. Arya stroked Drogon's neck. He banked left, favoring heeled wing. She selected highest juvenile and loosed arrow into its eye. The beast shrieked, faltered, slammed water. Remaining 8 tightened formation. Swarmed behavior. Harpooners fired. Shafts hissed, trailing cables weighted by lead. One struck Drogon's tail, deploying hooked flukes. Cables spooled behind, anchored on winch wagon below. Others missed or lodged in swamp mud. Cable tautened. Drogon jerked, slowed midair. Arya scrambled aft, hacking the embedded barb. Valyrian steel sparks, cable parted. But momentum lost. Juveniles seized moment, converging from all sides. Drogon spun and fired, but flame guttered, spent from first assaults. Acid spit from one wyvern sizzled across his throat, searing tender skin. He roared pain. The sound tremored Arya's bones. She saw only one choice, cut source. She climbed his shoulder ridge, leapt off. Air-shot wind whips across her face, but she angled body in to dive toward causeway, twisting to fall between wyvern knots. Harpooners yelled, pointing. She hit marsh water with a slap, sank into sucking cold. Pulling free of muck, she gasped dragon-hot smoke from sky mixed with swamp rot. Mirren's horse reared yards away. He wheeled, shocked to see lone girl rising like specter. Arya waited, feeling hidden ground firm beneath slime. Mirren lowered lance. She produced dagger. He charged. She timed breath, stepped aside last instant, slashed at horse's tendon. Beast screamed, crashed atop plank walkway, flinging rider. Mirren rolled, came up with curved saber. He circled, mud splattering golden scale. Arya advanced, low stance, dagger reversed. Blades met, a shrill clang. Mirren's strength surpassed hers. Each blow numbed her arm. She gave ground, drawing him onto shaky boards. Above, Drogon, freed of cables by his thrashing talons, now confronted 8 juveniles alone, but Arya dared not look. She feinted high, kicked plank edge, board snapped. Mirren stumbled. She lunged, stabbed under armpit joint. Scale gave like shell. He howled, punched hilt across her cheek. Stars burst behind her eyes. She tasted blood, saw him raise saber for coup. She rolled beneath swing, seized his wounded arm, and buried Valyrian dagger into throat seam beneath jaw. Warm spray washed her face. Mirren staggered, gurgling, then pitched sideways into mud that swallowed him slow, crimson swirling. Harpoon wagons screamed retreat orders. Without Mirren signals, juvenile wyverns lost coordination. Drogon capitalized, ripped one midair, burned 2 more. The remaining scattered. Soldiers on causeway threw weapons down, many diving into reeds to flee. Arya wiped blade on Mirren's cloak, then slogged back to firmer ground. Her cheek throbbed, eye swelling. She whistled once. Sharp Bravosi note. Drogon spiraled lower, wings tattered but serviceable. He landed beside her, crouched so she could climb. Mud sloughed off her boots as she swung aboard. They rose over causeway. Carcassan gongs pealed victory. On wall walkways, soldiers knelt to the dragon. Arya felt none of the elation Daenerys might have sought, only exhaustion and dull acceptance that slaughter solved nothing lasting. Yet Mirren's threat had ended. Back within July, healers swarmed Drogon anew. Arya submitted to salves and stitches herself, refusing poppy that dulled sense. When bandaged, she found Kimia waiting by a pomegranate tree, heavy with red bulbs. "The horn remains secure," Kimia said. "Myron's lieutenants will fight over scraps." She tilted head toward the dragon roost. "You have our gratitude." Half our council feared these walls would fall. Arya shrugged. "Walls always fall." Kimia considered her a long moment. "Then perhaps gardens must travel with those who guard them." She extended a small coffer of carved ivory. Inside lay 3 dragon glass vials, each cradling blood-red seeds, large as quail eggs. "Fire lilies?" she explained. "They bloom only in earth heated from below, volcanic vents. Their petals can clot dragon wounds faster than any salve. Plant them where you roost next." Arya accepted. "You expect me to leave? I expect the road to find you, whether you wish it or not." She was right. That very night, Arya walked terrace paths until she reached pool edge where moons mirrored. Drogon dozed beyond Steam Vale. She sat cross-legged and unfolded a smaller copper map, Raith Cairn Rookery. Mirren's lines ended there, but wyvern eggs remained. If she could steal Clutch, perhaps raise to dragon allegiance, or at least prevent next tyrant from repeating Myron's dream. Wind stirred hair at nape. Bran's voice seemed to ride it, soft, distant, threaded with raven call. "Find her. Broker peace before others choose war." She imagined John's face reading empty skies, searching for sister astride black wings. She plunged hand into pool up to elbow, letting heat scorch away hesitation. Then she rose, dripping, and strode to where Drogon slept. She pressed palm to warm jaw hinge. Softly, "Tomorrow we fly north." His eye cracked open, ember glow flicking. He snorted steam as if saying at last. Before dawn they lifted, first stars fading behind gray. Kimia watched from parapet, hair a slash of black against sea pearl light. She raised arm in farewell, but Arya did not wave. Gesture felt wrong, too small for what the world required. They angled northwest, toward Raith Cairn, toward egg rumors, toward currents that might one day carry them across the Jade Sea to whatever edge of Westeros remained unburnt. Arya pressed herself low against Drogon's neck, breathing the scent of healed scale and new wind. She thought of Nymeria again, of ghost thrumming tether that laced wolf to woman, of how pack never truly severed, even when oceans lay between. She whispered to the sky. Soon, miles rolled beneath shadow. Steam Garden shrank to pearl dot, then nothing. Ahead lay knife-cut horizon, bruised violet. Drogon roared once. No challenge, only announcement that he lived, that flames still drove within, that the story had not burned itself out. The sound echoed over empty sea. And somewhere far away, a white direwolf lifted his muzzle to listen. The road unspooled beyond sight, long enough perhaps to fill 5 more hours, 5 more lifetimes. Yet Arya felt no hurry now. She had severed the past's pursuing chains. Only possibility chased her, and she could outfly that for a while. She patted Dragonhide, settled deeper into the rhythm of wings. Dawn stroked the world in widening arcs of rose and gold as they hurtled north toward fresh myths. And, if the winds willed, toward whatever name Arya Stark might yet dare to carve upon the future. Aindirel. At the farthest northern reach of the Jade Sea, where the wind stiffened with the chill breath of distant mountain ranges, and the clouds rode low like battle banners above the water, Arya Stark pressed her cheek against Drogon's battered scales and watched the world diminish into silence and unknown. Each day brought the air a little thinner, the sun a little paler, and the maps in her memory emptier. Their flight had become a ritual of exhaustion and patience. By night they soared, gliding on updrafts that rolled off the icy spurs of the Bone Mountains. By day she scouted wild islets and hidden coves for water, food, any sign of life that might tell her what lands, if any, men and dragons still shared beyond the reach of empires and war. Sometimes, as Drogon slept curled around her in the dense fog of unfamiliar forests. Arya thought of King's Landing, the echo of Daenerys' last breath, the feel of the dagger's hilt slick with the last Targaryen blood. She wondered if Jon Snow stood atop the ruined walls of the Red Keep, searching the eastern sky for a shadow that would never return. She wondered if Sansa still ruled the north with a careful hand, if Bran's eyes still drifted in dream and storm, if any of them spoke her name at feasts or in quiet moments when the old world seemed unbearably far away. But always dawn came, and with it the new day's hunger. Arya scavenged roots and wild fruits, trapped small birds and roasted their flesh over embers, while Drogon gnawed the bones of wild oxen, deer, the rare mountain goat. In time she lost track of days. Her skin tanned and then roughened from cold. Her hair snarled with wind and sweat. Her only mirror was a sheet of rainwater in a stone hollow, and when she caught her reflection, she sometimes barely recognized the hard, lean woman with the watchful eyes and the scars crisscrossing her brow and cheek. Still, the mission bound her. The copper maps from Kimia remained dry and safe in her oilskin satchel, and every night by the fire she traced the route north and east to the rookery at Raeth Cairn. If dragon eggs existed there, they could not fall into another Myron's hands. She would not see the world suffer another tyrant with fire in their veins and no mercy in their heart. Sometimes she wondered if even Daenerys' dreams had begun with mercy, only to twist and blacken until there was nothing left but rage. One morning, as the sky bled from silver to gold, Arya and Drogon crested a mountain ridge and saw, at last, the signs of the rookery. Steam drifted in long, lazy banners from a blackened fissure in the rocks, and the air was thick with the smell of sulfur and hot stone. Great bones, larger than any horse, littered the slopes, ribs as tall as a man, vertebrae like wagon wheels, a skull cracked open by time and heat. The valley below lay cratered and bare, littered with clutches of eggs as big as barrels, some half buried in ash, others glowing faintly with the heat of the earth. Drogon landed on the rim, hissing in warning at the other shadows that moved among the eggs. Wyverns mostly, smaller than dragons, their wings webbed and their colors dulled, but still dangerous, still hungry. They scattered at Drogon's roar, slithering off into crevices and caves. Arya slid down from Drogon's neck, drawing needle, though she doubted steel alone would save her if one of the Great Mothers returned to claim her clutch. She crouched beside an egg, running her palm across its surface. It vibrated faintly with the promise of life within. She saw, etched in the soft clay, the outline of a hand. 3 fingers, claws tipped with onyx, a wyvern's mark. These were not the eggs of the old Valyrian line, but kin to them, wild and hungry and untamed. Arya wondered if Drogon would tolerate the hatchlings, if he would kill them or protect them, or if some deeper instinct would draw him to burn the nest and all its hope, rather than share his dominion. The ground shifted. Arya stiffened, listening. The whisper of talons on stone, the scrape of scales against rock. A shadow moved above, blocking the sun. She turned, heart hammering, as a wyvern 3 times the length of a horse slithered from the fissure, its scales black as pitch, its eyes the yellow of old bruises. It hissed, fanning its wings wide, mouth gaping to reveal the forked tongue and fangs glistening with venom. Drogon bellowed, flame gathering in his throat, but Arya held up a hand. "Wait," she whispered. Not to Drogon, but to herself, to the moment, to the world trembling on the knife edge between violence and understanding. She stepped forward, slow, careful, lowering needle. The wyvern's head snaked toward her, nostrils flaring, tongue flickering out to taste the air between them. Arya remembered the lessons of the House of Black and White. Be still, be silent, let the world speak. She drew a pouch from her belt, the last of the dried goat meat she had saved, and tossed a strip onto the stone. The wyvern snatched it up, jaws closing with a sickening crunch. Arya threw another, then another. The beast swallowed, snorted, then turned its head to Drogon. The great black dragon regarded the wyvern with the contempt of a king for a starving cur, but did not attack. When the last strip was gone, the wyvern slithered back into the fissure, trailing its wings. Arya let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. She walked among the eggs, counting. 12, 15, 18 tonned. Some were cracked, their shells littered with the bones of failed hatchlings. Others pulsed with heat, the membrane inside visible through thin spots in the clay. She pressed her ear to one and heard a faint tapping. A life inside, struggling toward the world. She remembered, suddenly, the night Daenerys had walked into the funeral pyre and emerged with 3 newborn dragons. She remembered the stories old Nan told of Valyrian blood, of sorcery and sacrifice, of magic and madness, twinned like serpents in the same egg. Arya wondered what magic still slumbered in the world, and whether it would awaken for her, or consume her as it had consumed so many others. That night, Arya slept in the lee of the crater, arms wrapped around her knees, needle and the Valyrian dagger at her side, Drogon coiled in a half-circle to guard the nest. She dreamed of wolves running under strange stars, of a white direwolf, howling for her across leagues and years, of Joan's voice whispering her name in the dark. She dreamed of fire, of wings, of an endless road eastward into shadow and dawn. She woke to the crack of an egg splitting open. A wyvern hatchling, wet and furious, struggled free, eyes clouded, mouth gaping. Arya reached out, feeling for the right gesture, the right tone, the right magic. She stroked the creature's snout. It hissed, then stilled, tongue flickering across her palm. Drogon watched, head tilted, and uttered a low, rumbling purr. The hatchling turned to him, blinked, then crawled into the shadow of his great foreleg. Drogon did not strike, did not burn. Instead, he lowered his head and sniffed the newborn, then licked the shell clean in one slow, deliberate pass. 3 more eggs hatched before the day ended. Arya tended each one, feeding them scraps, soothing them when they cried. Drogon grew restless, stalking the rim of the crater, wings half spread, but never interfered. By the 3rd dawn, she counted 5 living hatchlings clustered in Drogon's shade, and 3 more eggs cracked but lifeless. Their promise ended before it began. When the last egg hatched, Arya decided it was time. She found the copper vial Camilla had given her, crushed the fire lily seeds into a powder, and mixed it with water from the spring. She fed the potion to Drogon, smearing the rest on his wounds. The dragon seemed to relax, his breathing easier, the swelling at his throat receding. She let herself hope that he would heal, that the journey north had not broken him beyond repair. On the 4th day, as the sun crested the mountains and sent knives of light skittering across the eggshells, Arya packed her satchel and prepared to leave. She gathered the 5 hatchlings into a sling woven from her old cloak, strapping it across her chest. They squirmed and hissed, tails whipping, wings fluttering. Drogon lowered himself, allowing her to mount, then rose in a thunder of wings that sent the empty shells spinning across the stone. They flew north, following the valley until the land fell away into a broad, flat plain cut by rivers and spotted with herds of wild horses. Arya felt the weight of the hatchlings pressing against her heart, their warmth and wildness a pulse of possibility in a world grown too small for old hopes. Drogon flew slower now, his strength returning in waves, each wing beat steadier than the last. They landed by a river on the 3rd day, making camp among the roots of a vast, twisted tree. Arya built a fire, roasted fish for herself and the hatchlings, watched as Drogon hunted a stag, and returned with blood on his jaws. She counted the hatchlings each night, learning their patterns, their hungers, the different sounds they made when frightened, curious, or angry. As the moon waxed and waned, Arya felt herself changing. The road had made her a hunter, a survivor, a killer. But the hatchlings demanded patience, gentleness, a different kind of courage. She found herself speaking to them in the soft, sing-song tone she remembered from her mother, telling them stories of Winterfell and the Pack, of Nymeria running wild in the woods, of Joan's quiet strength and Sansa's unyielding will. Sometimes at night, she sat beside Drogon and watched the hatchlings sleep, curled together like kittens, their bellies rising and falling with the even breath of peace. She wondered what kind of world they would inherit. if it would be one ruled by swords and fire, or by something new. Something gentler. As they traveled farther north, the land grew colder, the trees thinner and more twisted. The rivers froze, and Arya wrapped the hatchlings in spare furs to keep them warm. Drogon seemed to thrive in the cold, his breath steaming in great clouds, his wounds nearly healed. One night, as the aurora shimmered overhead, Arya looked up and saw, far on the northern horizon, the green flicker of another fire. No campfire, but something vaster, brighter. She remembered the tales of the children of the forest, of magic old as the bones of the earth, of places where dragons and wolves had once shared the world in uneasy peace. She made for the light, guiding Drogon northward. The hatchlings rode in silence, their eyes wide, their bodies pressed close. As they flew, Arya saw traces of old roads, ruins half swallowed by snow and ice, standing stones carved with runes she could not read. At last, they landed in a clearing ringed by ancient trees, their branches laced with ice and starlight. In the center of the clearing, a great fire blazed, burning green and gold and blue. Figures stood around the fire, women and men in furs, their faces shadowed by hoods and antlered crowns. One stepped forward, her eyes pale as the dawn, her hair a cascade of silver and black. "We have been waiting for you, wolf girl," the woman said in a voice that was neither young nor old, but timeless as the wind. "And for you, son of fire." Arya slid from Drogon's back, the hatchling stirring restlessly in her sling. She stood her ground, hands at her sides, eyes wary but unafraid. "Who are you?" she asked. "We are what is left of the old world," the woman replied. "We keep the fire alive in the dark between the stars. We have seen your journey, your choices. You have slain a queen, freed a dragon, saved the eggs of a dying race." Daenerys order. Arya glanced at Drogon, who watched in silence, smoke curling from his nostrils. "What do you want from us?" Arya asked. "Nothing," the woman said. "Or everything. The world turns and the old magic returns with it. You carry the future in your hands and on your back. What you do with it will shape the next age." Arya thought of the wars she had seen. The cities burned, the families shattered. She thought of Jon, Sansa, Bran. She thought of Daenerys, her dreams, her death. "I only want peace," Arya said at last. "Then find it," the woman answered. "Teach your dragons the meaning of mercy, and the world may follow." The fire burned brighter, then dimmed. When Arya blinked, the clearing was empty save for herself, Drogon, and the hatchlings. She felt something new in the air, a promise, a warning, a challenge. She looked to the north, where the light still danced, and to the south, where memory waited. She knew the road would not end here. The world would never be free of war. Nor would she ever be truly free of the faces she had worn, the blood she had shed. But she could try, at least, to give the hatchlings something better, to teach them that power did not have to mean destruction, that fire could warm as well as burn. As dawn crested the trees, Arya mounted Drogon and gathered the hatchlings close. She rode into the sunrise, heart steady, eyes open, ready to meet whatever the world would bring. They traveled west for many days, flying over lands where the snow deepened, then receded into endless forests and green valleys. The hatchlings grew, their wings strengthening, their cries sharper and more commanding. Arya named them Ghost for the White One, Nymeria for the fiercest, Shaggy Dog for the wildest, Lady for the gentlest, and Grey Wind for the swiftest. Each name carried a memory, a prayer, a hope. As they neared the edge of the known world, Arya found herself thinking less of the past and more of the future. She dreamed of a place where dragons could live in peace, where men would not hunt them, where fire would be a blessing and not a curse. She knew it would not be easy. There would always be those who sought power, who would see dragons as weapons and not wonders. But Arya Stark had never feared hard roads. She had walked too many of them to stop now. One evening, as they camped beside a river in a wide grassy plain, Arya watched the hatchlings play in the shallows, snapping at fish and chasing each other through the threads. Drogon watched as well, his eyes soft with a kind of pride Arya had never seen before. She sat beside him, leaning against his flank, and for the first time in a long while, she let herself rest. The stars wheeled overhead, bright and cold, and the world seemed, for a moment, at peace. As she drifted to sleep, Arya dreamed of Winterfell, of a great hall filled with laughter and song, of a wolf running beneath the moon, of a dragon soaring over green fields. She dreamed of a world remade, not with fire and blood, but with hope and courage and love. And when she woke, she found that she still believed it was possible. Undan day. Mist gathered over the river, a silver shroud caught in the reeds. Arya woke in the chill pre-dawn. Her dreams faded, but the feeling of safety clinging to her skin like a second cloak. Around her, the hatchlings slept curled together in a tangled knot of wings and tails, making soft whistling noises as they breathed. Drogon rested nearby, his bulk a dark mountain against the paling sky, one golden eye half open, watching over his new brood and the lone human who had bound their fates together. The world seemed still in those hours before the sun, the hush broken only by distant calls of birds and the soft lap of water against stones. Arya rose quietly, stretching out stiffness from days of riding. Her clothes were patched and stained from weeks on the road, boots worn thin, but she moved with a silent grace. She fetched water from the river, splashed her face, and let the cold seep into her bones. There was something almost holy in this solitude, a kind of freedom she'd never felt in halls of stone or city streets choked with ash. Here, there was only herself, the dragons, and the open world. She gathered driftwood, coaxed a small fire to life, and cooked the last of her fish. The hatchlings roused at the smell, their eyes bright as polished gems, claws scrabbling in the sand. She fed them by hand, first Ghost, the white-scaled runt, always hungriest and boldest, then Lady, with her shimmering gold highlights, then the rest. Drogon watched, rumbling softly as each took its share. He seemed to approve, though Arya knew he understood little of human ways and less of kindness. Still, he protected the hatchlings, let them climb on his forelegs and tumble across his tail. Arya wondered if he remembered being young, if some memory of siblings lost in fire haunted his dreams as well. After breakfast, she explored the edge of the woods. The land was fertile, dotted with wildflowers and berry thickets. She saw deer prints and heard the splash of otters in a backwater pool. She thought of hunting, but decided to spare the bow. For now, the fish and her small stock of dried meat would suffice. Instead, she knelt beside a fallen tree and watched a beetle crawl across its bark, sunlight glinting off its carapace. It was strange, she thought, how the smallest things endured even when kingdoms fell and dragons flew. When she returned to camp, Drogon was stirring. He stretched his wings, testing the air, then lowered his head for Arya to mount. She wrapped the hatchlings in her fur cloak, nestling them into a sling at her side. She mounted Drogon, murmured encouragement, and together they lifted into the sky, leaving the river and the plain behind. They traveled west, following the course of the sun. The world opened before them, rolling fields of grass, dense forests split by winding streams, jagged hills that shone silver in the morning light. Arya watched it all. The vast emptiness, the signs of life here and there, smoke from a distant farmhouse, a herd of wild horses running beneath them, children waving from a village square as Drogon passed overhead. Sometimes Arya waved back. Sometimes she simply watched in silence, her heart torn between longing and the knowledge that she could never truly return to the world she'd left behind. By midday, they reached a new land, a valley lush with orchards, the scent of apples sweet on the wind. Arya directed Drogon down, landing in the shadow of a stone tower. She listened, heard no shouts, no clamor of alarm, only the gentle hush of leaves in the breeze. She slid from Drogon's back, set the hatchlings down in the grass, and approached the tower. It was old, its stones lichen-covered, and the door half-rotted. Arya knocked, then entered. Inside she found little but dust and silence. A table with broken chairs, a hearth with ancient ashes, a rusted sword hanging from a peg on the wall. There were carvings on the table's edge, names, dates, some so old she could barely make them out. She traced them with her finger, wondering who had lived here, what stories the stones could tell. Was this how her own life would end? Just a name carved in wood? A memory left to fade? She left a coin on the table for good luck, then stepped outside. Drogon had curled up beneath the apple trees, the hatchlings clambering over his tail, chasing each other in circles. Arya plucked an apple, bit into it, juice running down her chin. For a moment she was a child again, running wild in Winterfell's orchard, laughing with Bran and Rickon. Memory cut sharp and clean, sweet and sad. She gathered apples for the hatchlings, who tore at them with more enthusiasm than skill, then sat beside Drogon, leaning against his side. She felt the slow rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth that radiated from his body. She closed her eyes and let herself drift. They rested in the orchard that day, soaking in the peace. At dusk, Arya made a circuit of the valley, checking for signs of people, tracks, anything to warn of danger. She saw nothing but the prints of deer and foxes, a lone wolf's track pressed into mud by the stream. She knelt, tracing it, wondering if Nymeria still roamed these wilds, if the great she-wolf remembered her packmate lost so long ago. As darkness fell, Arya built a fire, cooked a thin soup of apples and herbs, and watched the stars appear one by one. She felt small beneath their gaze, but also part of something vast and enduring. The hatchling slept curled at her feet, Drogon's wing arching protectively overhead. She dreamed of faces, her mother's, her father's, Joan's, ghosts from the past, their voices mingling with the wind. She dreamed of a road stretching ever westward, of distant lands and stranger peoples. She dreamed of fire and blood, of hope and sorrow, of dragons flying free above a world that could never quite forget its scars. The next morning, Arya and Drogon set out once more, skirting the edge of the mountains. The hatchlings were growing fast, their wings stronger, their cries louder. They took to short flights beside Drogon, tumbling in the air, chasing birds and each other. Arya watched with pride and fear. It was only a matter of time before one strayed too far, encountered danger beyond her reach. That day, as they flew above a narrow gorge, Arya saw movement below. A caravan winding through the pass, banners flying, soldiers in mail marching beside wagons. At the head rode a woman in armor, her hair bound back, her cloak the color of storm clouds. Arya recognized the crest on her shield, a crescent moon and sword. Ealdot. She wondered if Sansa had sent riders this far, or if some other noble now claimed these lands. She urged Drogon lower, circling above the caravan. The soldiers scattered, some raising bows, others dropping their weapons and fleeing. The woman at the head held her ground, raising her face to the sky. Arya dropped lightly from Drogon's back, the hatchlings following. She walked toward the caravan, hands open, needle at her side but unsheathed. The soldiers watched her warily, some whispering her name, others making signs against evil. The woman in armor stepped forward, her eyes wide with recognition. "Arya Stark?" she said. "Is it truly you?" Arya studied her, searching for a clue. The woman's face was strong and proud, her eyes blue as frost. After a moment, Arya remembered. "Elaine Stone," she said, using the old name Sansa had once adopted. "No. Lady Anya of the Eyrie now, I think." The woman smiled. "You've grown, Arya. And you've brought friends." She glanced at Drogon, who loomed in the background, the hatchlings clustering at Arya's heels. "Travel is easier with wings," Arya replied, a hint of a smile breaking her reserve. Anya laughed, the tension easing among her men. She gestured Arya to walk with her, away from the others. "Sansa has sent word for you, Arya. She feared you lost, dead or worse. She says the North is free now, but not at peace. Too many old wounds, too many lords with their own ambitions." Arya nodded, thinking of the world she'd left. "I can't return," she said quietly. "Not yet. There's work still to do." Anya didn't press. "Will you let me tell Sansa you're alive? She deserves that much." Arya hesitated, then nodded. "Tell her I remember the pack. Tell her I'm safe, and I'll come home when the time is right." And they spoke a while longer, Anya asking questions about Arya's travels, about the dragons. Arya told her some of it, the east, the eggs, the wyvern battle, but left out the deepest parts. The fire in the north, the woman in the clearing, the promise she'd made. At length, Anya returned to her men, and Arya mounted Drogon, the hatchling scrambling up beside her. They lifted into the sky, following the river west. Anya watched them go, her banner fluttering in the breeze, her eyes bright with hope and sorrow. Days passed in wandering. Arya kept to wild places, avoiding towns and villages when she could. She hunted when hungry, fished when rivers allowed. She taught the hatchlings to catch their own food, to avoid fire unless necessary, to fear men and their arrows. She spoke to Drogon often, confiding her worries, her dreams, her memories of home. Sometimes she wondered if he understood, if he remembered Daenerys, or if she was just another human voice among many. The hatchlings grew bolder, flying farther each day. One morning, Ghost failed to return. Arya searched the woods, calling his name, but found only a patch of scorched grass and a few white scales. She grieved, fearing he'd fallen to poachers or wild beasts. That night, she sat by the fire, silent, the others huddled close for warmth. Drogon nudged her gently, his breath warm on her face. Arya stroked his snout, blinking away tears. "I know," she whispered. "This is how the world is. The strong survive. But I had hoped." The next dawn, Ghost returned, limping but alive, a bloody gash on his flank. Arya cleaned the wound, pressed moss to stanch the bleeding, and sang to him as she worked. A soft, wordless song of the north, of snow and wind and the promise of spring. Ghost licked her hand, eyes bright with trust. They lingered in that valley until Ghost healed, and in that time, Arya found a new rhythm. Wake, hunt, teach, rest. The dragons learned from her, and she from them. She watched them play, fight, hunt, sleep. She began to dream of a future, not as a killer, not as a ghost, but as a guardian, a builder, a mother to these strange, wild creatures who carried the hope of a new world in their veins. The seasons turned. Leaves reddened, then fell, and snow dusted the mountains. Arya prepared the dragons for winter, teaching them to find shelter, to dig in against storms, to conserve their strength. She built a crude shelter of branches and hides, lined it with furs, and shared her warmth with the hatchlings as the wind howled outside. One night, as the snow drifted deep and the moon shone pale through the trees, Arya heard a cry. A wolf's howl, close and urgent. She rose, stepping into the cold, and saw a shadow slipping through the trees. Nymeria, Dot. The great she-wolf paused at the edge of the firelight, eyes meeting Arya's. For a moment, all the years fell away. Arya knelt, hand outstretched. Nymeria approached, slowly, then pressed her nose to Arya's palm. The pack drifted at the edge of the woods, watching. Arya wept, holding Nymeria's great head in her arms. "I missed you," she whispered. "I've come so far. I'm not sure I know the way back." "Nan." Nymeria licked her face, then sat beside her, their breaths mingling in the cold. The hatchlings crept out, curious but wary. Drogon watched in silence, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight. For several days, Nymeria stayed with them, her pack mingling with the dragons in uneasy peace. Arya hunted with her, running through the snow, feeling the strength of the pack at her side. For the first time since leaving Westeros, Arya felt whole, grounded, connected to something older and deeper than herself. But Nymeria's place was with her pack, just as Arya's was with the dragons. When the thaw came, and the rivers ran swift again, Nymeria led her wolves away, pausing only once to look back. Arya watched until the last shadow vanished among the trees, then returned to the dragons. As the snow melted and spring returned, Arya felt the pull of the road once more. She packed her scant belongings, called the dragons, and set out westward. They crossed mountains where the wind cut sharp as Valyrian steel, valleys where wildflowers painted the ground in riotous color, forests so deep and dark they seemed untouched by time. Arya saw signs of men now and then, a campfire, a hunting party, a distant shout. But she kept to herself, trusting in stealth and the dragon's watchful eyes. In a green valley beside a wide, slow river, Arya made camp. Here, the dragons seemed happiest. Plenty of game, shelter from the wind, water deep and clear. Arya set herself to building. A crude cabin of logs, a corral for the hatchlings, a store of dried meat and berries. She moved with purpose, the days passing in a blur of sweat and laughter and small triumphs. She taught the dragons to fish, to avoid the traps men set for larger prey. She taught them to hide at the first scent of men, to return only when she called. She practiced with needle, keeping her skills sharp, but found herself using the blade less and less. The world here was quiet, the dangers few. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned to fire, Arya sat on the riverbank, feet in the cool water. Drogon sat beside her. The hatchlings ranged around them, dozing or chasing insects in the grass. Arya closed her eyes and listened, to the river, to the dragons, to the distant cries of birds. A shadow passed overhead. Arya opened her eyes and saw a falcon circling high. She remembered Maester Luwin's lessons, how the falcon was the sigil of House Arryn, how it soared higher than any other bird. She smiled, thinking of Sansa, of Bran, of the family she might someday see again. But for now, Arya belonged to the wild, to the dragons, to the hope of a world remade. The seasons passed. The hatchlings grew strong and fierce, their scales shining, their wings broad. Drogon grew older, his pace slower, his eyes wiser. Arya watched them with pride and a bittersweet ache. She knew she could not keep them forever, that one day they would fly away, seeking their own paths, their own destinies. When that day came, Arya let them go, one by one. She climbed to the highest hill, watched as each dragon circled her, then soared into the sky, their cries echoing across the valley. Drogon remained, old and loyal, his shadow a constant companion. Arya stood alone on the hill, the wind in her hair. The world spread before her. She was no one, and someone, a killer and a guardian, a Stark of Winterfell, and a child of the wild. She walked down to the river, knelt in the shallows, and let the water wash over her hands. She thought of all she had lost, all she had found, and all that still waited. As the sun rose, Arya Stark rose with it, ready for whatever the world would bring. She traveled still, sometimes alone, sometimes with Drogon, sometimes with others she met along the way. She became a legend, a woman with a dragon, a protector of the wild, a whisper in the dark. Some called her witch, some called her savior, but Arya knew herself only as a girl who had survived, who had chosen mercy over vengeance, hope over despair. She grew older, but never weak. She taught others what she had learned, that the world was vast, that power could be tempered by kindness, that the past need not dictate the future. She left stories in her wake, memories in the hearts of those she helped. And one day, when the world was ready, when peace had a chance to take root, Arya Stark returned home. She walked the halls of Winterfell, her footsteps echoing on cold stone. She found Sansa in the Godswood, Bran in the Solar, Jon waiting by the hearth. They embraced her, and for a time she let herself rest. But the road called, and Arya answered. She rode out one last time, Drogon soaring overhead, the wind in her hair, the future unwritten before her. In the end, Arya Stark was never just a killer, never just a hero. She was the sum of her choices, the hope of a better world, a legend born of fire and blood and love. And as the sun set on her last journey, Arya looked back only once, then faced the horizon and walked into the light. In the honeyed dawn of a new spring, the river's song grew strong and swift. Arya woke with dew wet on her lashes, tangled in her wolfskin, her dreams still ringing with the echoes of laughter in stone halls, and the thunder of dragon wings above a white sky. She lay still for a time, breathing in the cool air, watching steam rise from Drogon's nostrils, where he dozed by the embers of last night's fire. Beyond him, the wild grass trembled in the wind, the hatchlings' tracks a tangle through the morning frost. She rose quietly, the old pain in her knee reminding her of a blow from the hound years past. Arya ran her hand through the tousled hair at her brow, and padded down to the river's edge, her steps soundless on the moss. She crouched by the water, let it run cold and clear over her fingers. In its reflection, her face was thin and sunburned, the eyes hard and deep, stark eyes, grown strange and old with memory. She splashed her face, shaking off the last dregs of sleep, and looked east, where gold flooded the sky and the world beyond the horizon beckoned in silence. Her dragons were hungry. She heard them before she saw them. The shrill piping of the smallest lady who fluttered down from a crooked pine to land at her feet. The heavier landing of Ghost, tail-flicking wings mantled in a challenge to a fat crow, perched on a dead branch. Drogon rumbled and lifted his head, blinking at the sky, and then the other two, Grey Wind and Shaggy Dog, emerged from the tall grass, already sparring in play. Arya smiled at the clumsy clamor of their hunt, their scuffles echoing the ghosts of another pack. She spent the morning foraging, her bow strung tight, arrows fletched with feathers from the river marsh. She brought down 2 plump hares, skinned and gutted them, and cooked them on a spit for her breakfast, while the dragons snapped bones and lapped the blood from the grass. Drogon tore the hare's remains to share with the hatchlings, his patience surprising in such a beast, and Arya watched, thinking of the days when she herself had snarled over food with a pack, sharp-eyed and wild as any wolf. Later she set out along the riverbank, dragons trailing in her wake, their shadows gliding over water. The land here was quiet, old forest to the north, wide meadows to the west, a ridge of blue hills crouching on the horizon. Arya felt the restlessness in her chest, the itch of journey. She found a narrow game trail winding up into the trees and followed it, bow in hand, dragons threading through the underbrush. By noon she had reached the crest of the ridge. The view startled her. Far to the west, smoke curled from the chimneys of a village half hidden by orchard and wild hedge, while northward, the land climbed into wild, snow-capped mountains. A faint road cut between, more a memory than a track, and for a moment Arya felt the world open before her, vast and green and empty. She knelt in the heather, feeling the sun warm her back, and let her mind wander. She thought of the path she had traveled, of faces blurred with time and loss, of the girl she had once been, little Arya, quick to laugh, quicker to bite, eager for stories of knights and heroes. She thought of the girl who learned to kill in the dark, who had run from home and never quite come back. She thought of Daenerys' death, the blood staining her hands, the moment when Drogon's hot breath had not burned her but only warmed, the way fire sometimes does when it means to heal and not destroy. She felt the dragons crowding close, warm and alive beside her. She pressed her hand to Ghost's smooth scales, felt the steady thud of his heart. "We are a pack," she whispered, and the word felt strange and true on her tongue. A hawk wheeled above. Arya watched it with narrowed eyes. The bird soared, circled, then dived, vanishing behind the trees toward the village. Arya's gaze lingered on the distant rooftops, the drift of smoke. Part of her longed to go down, to see faces, to hear the murmur of voices, but another part, older, colder, kept her rooted where she was. People feared dragons, and the world had not forgotten fire and war. Arya had no wish to bring terror or death to any hearth, not anymore. That afternoon she returned to camp, following the twisting shadows home. She fished the river, gathering enough for supper, then spent the evening patching the fur lining of her boots and combing knots from the hatchlings' wings. She told them stories as she worked, of direwolves and snarks, of the green boys who had once been her brothers, of the old gods watching from the heart trees. They listened, bright-eyed and twitching, though whether they understood she could not say. Night came on soft, with stars glittering above the treetops. Arya sat by the fire, humming to herself, sharpening needle until the blade gleamed pale in the darkness. The dragons slept in a heap. Drogon coiled behind them like a mountain, the tip of his tail twitching in dreams. Arya stared into the embers, letting the heat chase the chill from her bones. Somewhere in the woods, a wolf howled. She listened to its song until she slept. The days that followed were slow and gentle. Arya hunted, fished, taught the dragons how to chase rabbits and catch fish. She watched them grow, felt their wings strengthen, saw the glimmer of fire rising in their bellies. The wilds taught her as well, how to track game through old snow, how to follow the calls of birds to water, how to read the wind and sky for weather. She felt herself growing hard and lean again, her senses sharp, her hands quick as any beast. One morning, as she returned from checking her snares, Arya found strangers in her valley. 3 men, hard-eyed and armed, leading a pack horse laden with furs. They froze at the sight of Drogon, his head rising above the bracken, teeth bared in silent warning. Arya moved without thought, sliding through the grass with needle drawn, the dragons arrayed behind her. The men raised their hands. "We mean no harm," the tallest cried, voice trembling. "We're only trappers, trading with the villages yonder. Never seen a beast like that. 7 hells is it yours, girl?" Arya studied them in silence, weighing the lie. She saw fear in their eyes, and something else. A hunger, maybe, for stories and gold and the edge of the wild. "He's mine," she said at last, "and he doesn't like poachers." The men shuffled back, muttering apologies. "We'll be gone by nightfall, we swear it. No trouble meant." Arya watched them go, Hen never leaving her sword. When they were out of sight, she checked their camp, found nothing but scraps and a few broken traps. She let them leave unchallenged, but marked the valley's edges more carefully after that, placing signs in the old tongue of the north, knots of grass, stones stacked just so, warnings for those who could read them. Afterwards, Arya wondered at her restraint. Once she would have struck first, ended the threat before it began. Now something in her resisted the kill. Some new sense of what it meant to protect, not just survive. She watched the dragons roughhousing in the grass, their jaws snapping playfully, and wondered if mercy might be stronger than vengeance after all. The season turned, and the valley grew green and thick with life. Flowers bloomed in carpets along the river, and bees droned from dawn to dusk. The dragons grew restless, their wings beating in the long grass, eyes fixed on the sky. Arya took to riding Drogon farther each day, scouting the country, testing the edges of the wild. She saw villages, farms, once a lord's hunting party, with bright banners fluttering in the wind. She kept her distance, watched from high above. One evening, as she flew low over a river gorge, Arya saw smoke, black and heavy, not the gentle plume of a hearth fire, but the choking stench of something burning. She urged Drogon lower, the hatchlings circling above. Below, she found a village half in ruins, cottages collapsed, fields blackened. Bodies littered the ground, men and women slain. The corpses burned, but not by dragonfire. A band of rioters, hard-faced men with crude armor and red sashes at their waists, picked through the wreckage, dragging villagers from their hiding places. Arya saw a woman struck down, a child pulled screaming from under a cart. Her heart turned to ice. She landed behind a line of trees, silent as death. The hatchlings crept with her, low and watchful, Drogon's growl of thunder in the dusk. Arya moved among the shadows, swift and unseen, her old training returning in a rush. Needle found its mark in the neck of one bandit, then another. She cut a third down as he raised his sword to a cowering boy. A shout rang out, "Witch! The witch is here!" And the raiders fled, dropping weapons as the dragons broke from cover. Drogon roared, fire blossoming across the field, but Arya called him back, not wishing to burn more than was already lost. The survivors gathered in the ruined square, staring at Arya and the dragons in awe and terror. A gray-bearded woman stepped forward. "Who are you?" she asked. Arya hesitated. "No one," she said, but saw the confusion on their faces. "Call me Arya. The dragons are with me. You're safe now." They thanked her, pressing food and gifts into her hands, bread, cheese, a silver ring. Arya took only a little, telling them to keep the rest. She spent the night in the ashes, helping bury the dead, tending wounds, giving what comfort she could. At dawn, she and the dragons departed, the villagers watching them go with hope and fear mingled in their eyes. Word spread. Arya found signs of her passage wherever she went. Chalked on doors, whispered in markets, scratched on the bark of old trees. The dragon woman, the wolf queen, the witch who brings fire and peace. Men sought her out. Some in need, some with vengeance in their hearts, some just to see the legend made flesh. She learned to keep moving, never staying in one place for long. She helped where she could. A farm saved from flood. A bandit band routed from a trading road. A wounded child healed with dragonfire cautery. Each act added to her myth, but Arya felt no pride in it. She remembered her father's words. The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. She swung the sword, but never with joy. Her travels took her farther south, where the land grew warmer and the rivers wide. She followed rumors of poachers hunting dragons, of slavers trading in stolen children, of old magics stirring in lost places. She found evidence of all three: a wyvern's skull hung from a tree, a cage of weeping boys in a ruined holdfast, a circle of standing stones humming with power beneath the moon. Each time, she intervened as she could, using fear and steel and the threat of fire to keep the worst at bay. One night, deep in the forest, Arya sat with Drogon and the hatchlings, a fire burning low. She thought of her family, of Winterfell's high towers and the Godswood's silent heart, of Sansa's wisdom and Jon's steadfastness. She thought of Bran, seeing all with eyes beyond time, and wondered if her brother watched her even now. A voice came out of the darkness, a whisper, or perhaps only her own thoughts. You walk a long road, Arya Stark, but all roads lead home in the end. Then this one dento. By. She rose and looked into the night, but saw nothing but stars and the slow drift of smoke. When summer came, Arya turned north again, feeling the pull of home. She skirted the edge of the haunted forest, crossed rivers swollen with meltwater, and climbed high passes where the snow lingered even in the hottest months. She met wildlings who greeted her as kin, their eyes wary of the dragons but full of wonder. She listened to their tales, shared her food, and learned of troubles in the far north. A sickness among the elk herds, a shadow in the sky, rumors of a new darkness stirring beyond the wall. Arya went as far as the shivering sea. Standing on the cliffs where the wind howled like wolves, she saw whales breaching, great white bears lumbering across the ice, the northern lights burning green and purple in the endless night. The dragons flew with her, their wings casting shadows on the water. She felt, for the first time in years, the old ache for her father, her brothers, the home she had lost. She turned south once more, traveling slowly, the dragons growing ever more mighty and wise. Ghost and Shaggy Dog hunted seals along the coast. Lady preferred the forests, Grey Wind the high crags. Drogon remained at her side, his eyes golden and ancient, his scales shining with health. She met Sansa at the edge of the Wolfswood, their embrace silent and fierce. Sansa wept to see her sister alive, and Arya wept too, though she would never say so. They walked together beneath the trees, speaking of old days and new, of the wounds they carried and the hopes they dared to share. Sansa asked Arya to stay, to be her shield and her counsel. But Arya shook her head. "My place is with the dragons," she said. "There are things in this world that only I can do." Sansa nodded, understanding more than Arya could say. "You are a Stark of Winterfell, Arya. Never forget that." "I won't," Arya promised. She left at dawn, the dragons wheeling overhead, her heart heavy but her purpose clear. In time, Arya's legend grew. Songs were sung of the Wolf Queen with dragons at her side, of the woman who brought peace to wild places, who punished the wicked and protected the weak. Children played at being Arya, chasing each other through the fields with sticks for swords and cloaks of leaves. But Arya was never at ease with fame. She moved always forward, never lingering where her name might become a burden. She wandered forests and mountains, deserts and swamps, learning the ways of the wild and the wisdom of dragons. She met wise women and madmen, healers and killers, kings in exile and children with the gift of prophecy. In the end, Arya found what she had sought. Not glory, not vengeance, but a kind of peace. She learned to forgive herself, to accept her past, to trust in the future she could help shape. She grew older, lines of care and laughter creasing her face, silver in her hair, but her eyes remained sharp and bright. When at last Drogon died, old and weary, his head in her lap as the sun set, Arya mourned him deeply, burying him on a hill above the river, planting wild flowers over his grave. The hatchlings, now grown and fierce, came to her side, their grief raw and wild. She comforted them as best she could, then watched as they flew away, their cries fading into the distance. Arya lived many years after that, a wanderer and a watcher, a friend to beasts and men alike. She returned often to Winterfell, sitting beneath the heart tree, speaking with her family, old wounds healed by time and love. She taught the children of the North how to move silently, how to find water and food, how to respect the power of the wild. And when her own time came, Arya lay down beneath the stars, needle at her side, the wind singing through the grass. She thought of all she had seen, all she had lost and found, all she had made new. She closed her eyes and let herself drift, trusting in the pack, in the dragons, in the hope that the world would endure. In the years that followed, stories of Arya Stark spread across the land. Some said she was a ghost, others that she became a dragon herself, soaring above the world in fire and freedom. The truth was quieter, deeper, a legacy of mercy and courage, a reminder that even in a world scarred by war, there could be peace and hope and the promise of a new beginning. And so the Wolf Queen's legend endured, woven into the fabric of the North, sung by firesides and whispered in the wild places, where dragons still flew, and the memory of Arya Stark lingered, sharp and true as steel. Summer drifted over the land like a long sigh after tears, and Arya wandered as she always had. Never in a straight line, never in a place for long, her boots finding the secret ways and wild passes that ran like hidden veins through the world. In the North, the days were bright and fierce, the rivers brimming with meltwater, the wildflowers blooming in great riots of color wherever the soil dared to hold. The dragons followed, now nearly full-grown, their scales shining in the high sun, their cries echoing from the crags and sweeping down to the valleys below. Arya had become a legend, less a girl, more story woven of rumor and wind. Small folk whispered of her arrival as an omen, their children hiding behind fences to watch as the dragons passed overhead, while old men tipped their caps and called blessings in the names of the old gods. She moved like a shadow among the market crowds, always at the edges, her eyes wary, the sword on her hip both threat and promise. Sometimes she wore a hood, sometimes her face was bared to the breeze, the wolf in her heart always on the hunt for what came next. She lingered near Winterfell for a time, drawn to the shape of the place, its stones and banners, and the familiar scent of pine and smoke. Sansa was queen, ruling with a wise hand. Her people fed and warm, even as threats gathered at the boundaries of her domain. The Starks were honored now, their names spoken with pride, but Arya could not stay. Her blood was restless. She felt the call of empty roads and silent forests, the ache to be moving, changing, free. Sansa understood, though the pain flickered in her eyes each time Arya vanished into the mist. Arya took to following the old northern paths, hunting with the dragons, her days marked by the chase and the kill, by evenings spent in the hush of forgotten ruins or beneath the open stars. Ghost, now grown sleek and silver, hunted ahead, his white wings like a banner among the trees. Lady glided low, her scales catching the last light. Shaggy Dog and Grey Wind circled wide, restless and bold. Each night, Arya counted them and thought of her siblings, the echoes of the old pack in every movement, every cry. But the North was not without dangers. Raiders still prowled the borderlands, desperate men driven by hunger or hate, and rumors of darker things returned, shadows in the forest, a sickness among the herds, stories of children vanishing near the Barrow Downs. Arya heard them all. She listened in the tapper rooms and by the wells, watching faces for truth or lies. Each time, she and the dragons answered the call. Bandits fled before fire and fang, wildlings brought their grievances and found justice or mercy. The lost children returned from the woods pale and silent but alive. One night, a desperate knock came at her camp as she sat beside the river, cleaning the last of a trout. A boy and his mother, faces streaked with tears, their clothes ragged, breathless with flight. The boy's brother had gone missing at dusk, pulled from a copse of pines by something that moved too fast for any man. Arya stood, her eyes narrowing, a cold anger settling over her shoulders. She promised to find him, calling Drogon with a whistle that split the dark. They flew through the forest. Arya crouched low against Drogon's neck, her eyes searching the moonlit ground. The hatchlings, no longer so small, swept ahead, their shadows racing like wolves across the bracken. They caught the scent soon enough. Blood and old earth, the rot of things that dwelled in darkness. Gray wind let out a high, keening cry, and Arya urged Drogon lower. They found the boy in the ruins of a barrow, cold and shivering, eyes wild. Something else skittered in the dark. Half seen, too pale, too thin. Arya slipped from Drogon's back and crept into the stones, needle flashing as the creature lunged. It was neither white nor man, but some twisted thing, starved and mad, its eyes milky and blind. Arya moved as the faceless men had taught her, her step silent, her blade sure. When the thing fell, twitching, to the earth, she shuddered and whispered thanks to whatever gods watched these wilds. She brought the boy home by morning. The mother wept, clutching her son, and the village woke to find Arya and the dragons in their square. No one dared approach at first. Only when Arya's smile did the tension break, and a girl ran forward with a basket of bread. Arya accepted the gift, but she did not linger. She asked for nothing, only pressed a stone into the boy's hand, a polished agate she'd found near the river to ward off nightmares. The villagers called her savior as she rode away, but Arya only felt tired, the memory of the creature in the barrow riding her shadow for days. She ranged farther then, following the rumors of unrest. In the far east, where the hills grew ragged and the streams ran cold and clear, she found a band of poachers with crossbows tipped in poison, their camp marked by the skulls of wild things. They had heard of Arya and her dragons, and one tried to bargain, offering her a pouch of coin for safe passage. She refused. There's no safe passage for those who hunt what they do not need. That night, fire licked the sky as the dragons circled the camp. Arya let them see what wrath looked like, swift and bright and absolute. In the morning, the woods were silent, and word spread that the dragon woman had left none alive. Not all her work was violence. Arya mended fences and healed wounds, taught the old songs to children in lonely villages, left food for widows and orphans at the doorways of mossy crofts. She took no payment, only a place by the fire when the night grew cold. Sometimes when she felt the loneliness pressing close, she told stories of Nymeria and the dire wolf pack, of her journeys across the narrow sea, of the days when Winterfell's halls rang with laughter and steel. The dragons listened, their eyes bright in the firelight. In the deep of autumn, a raven found her on the edge of the wolf's wood, its wings battered, its message sealed in blue wax. It bore the crest of House Arryn, a summons, polite but urgent. Trouble on the high passes, the letter said. Rumors of a shadow with wings, men found burned to cinders, the High Steward afraid to speak the truth aloud. Arya frowned, knowing her own dragons could not be everywhere at once. She traveled by foot at first, cloaked and alone, then by dragonback once she'd reached the border of the Vale. The mountains rose before her, white-tipped and sharp, their slopes dark with pine. Arya passed villages abandoned, sheep bones scattered in the grass, the taste of ash in the air. The stories grew wilder with each mile. Some said a dragon out of old Valyria had returned, others that a band of wild mages from Asshai had called forth a demon. Near the summit of a wind-blown pass, Arya found what she sought. The earth was scorched, the rocks melted to glass in places. In the center of a blasted clearing stood a beast, no dragon, but a wyvern, lean and battered, its wings tattered, one eye gone. Its scales were greenish, streaked with old blood and soot, and it snapped at Arya with a broken, maddened hunger. Tied to a tree nearby was a man, alive but insensible, his face blackened by burns. Arya dismounted, speaking low to Drogon, who hissed at the wyvern, but held his ground. She advanced slowly, dagger drawn, her eyes never leaving the beast. It lunged, snapping at her, then recoiled with a shriek, pain flaring as it twisted its wounded wing. Arya felt pity. Even for this enemy. She circled, watching for the right moment, then darted in and slashed at its throat. The wyvern thrashed, fire flickering in its ruined mouth, but Arya moved quickly, finding the artery, ending its pain. It died with a final, shuddering breath. She freed the man, giving him water and salve for his wounds. He spoke little, his mind clouded by pain, but Arya gathered that he had been a hunter, sent from the Eyrie to track the beast, caught in the firestorm. She helped him down the mountain, the dragon circling above, and left him with the sisterman who came searching at dawn. "Tell your lady the danger is done," Arya said. "But warn her, there will always be others. The world is changing, and not all monsters are made of flesh." Next sound. She turned away before the thanks could be spoken, riding Drogon into the sunrise. She felt the old pull again, the sense that her work was never finished, that new threats would rise as quickly as she put the old ones down. It was not despair she felt, but a fierce, stubborn resolve. In the months that followed, Arya wandered farther than ever before, across the neck and into the green richness of the riverlands, through the tumbled stones of Harrenhal, down into the storm-racked woods of the Dornish marches. She crossed swords with outlaws, broke bread with fisherfolk, slept under the trees and on the roofs of abandoned towers. In every place, the dragons were with her, their presence both shield and burden. Some welcomed her as a hero, others as a warning. None dared defy her for long. It was in the Stormlands that she met an old knight with a face like a battered oak. He offered her shelter, no questions asked, and she sat with him beside a smoking fire, sharing news and silence. "I knew your father," he said finally. "He was a just man. Would have liked to see the world you're making. Fierce, but fair." "Oh, no." Arya looked into the flames. "The world doesn't change for one person's will, but you do what you can." He nodded, passing her a battered cup. That's all any of us can do." As the first snows fell, Arya made her way north again. She felt the age in her bones, the weight of years on the road. Her hair was streaked with silver now, her eyes as sharp as ever. She moved with care, teaching the dragons patience, caution, the lesson of mercy before wrath. Ghost was the first to strike at threats, but Lady reined him in. Shaggy Dog scouted ahead, Grey Wind watched the sky. Drogon, old and slower, flew rarely now, his strength spent in short bursts. One winter, she returned to Winterfell, drawn by a longing she could no longer name. She found Jon there, his hair white, his face lined but kind. They embraced, no words needed. Sansa joined them, the queen in the north, wise and gentle, her children grown tall and brave. Bran, she learned, had died years before, his eyes closing on the vision of a world at peace. Arya wept for her brother, then let the grief go as she always had, by moving forward. The family dined together beneath the great hall's high rafters, the walls warm with fire and memory. Arya watched her nieces and nephews dance, told them tales of dragons and distant lands, let them touch the old scars on her hands. At dawn, she knelt by the heart tree, whispering thanks and farewells. When she left, Arya knew it would be the last time. The dragons circled overhead, their cries wild and sweet. She rode south through the snows, her spirit light. She thought often of Daenerys, of the shadow that had lain across Westeros, of how thin the line was between savior and destroyer. She remembered her father's voice, the lesson of justice, and made a promise to herself to wield her power with wisdom, to forgive herself for old crimes, to leave the world better than she'd found it. The years turned. The north prospered. Peace held more often than not. The dragons grew and faded, each finding their own corner of the wild world to claim. Ghost took to the icy cliffs, Lady to the deep forests. Shaggy Dog and Grey Wind ranged the skies, fierce and free. Drogon, oldest and dearest, died by a quiet lake at the end of a long summer, his body a hill of black scales and gentle memories. Arya buried him with her own hands, planting wildflowers and singing the old songs as she worked. At last, When her hair was all silver and her face lined as a riverbank, Arya returned to the river where she had once begun. She built a small house, tending her garden and her memories. Children from the nearby village visited her, begging for stories, bringing gifts of honey and bread. She taught them what she could: the secrets of the woods, the wisdom of dragons, the way of the wolf. They listened, wide-eyed, running back through the fields with tales of the witch woman who had tamed fire. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold, Arya felt the old restlessness again. She walked down to the river, needle at her side, and watched the water flow. She felt the years, the weight of loss and love, the endless turn of the world. She knelt and dipped her hand in the current, whispering her name to the water, her promise to the wind. She dreamed that night of Winterfell, of wolves running under the stars, of laughter and song, of a world remade by hope and mercy. She dreamed of dragons circling above green hills, of peace blooming where fire once raged. When Arya's last day came, it was with no fear and no regret. She lay in her small bed, the window open to the sound of birds, her memories bright as the morning sky. She thought of her family, of her dragons, of the lives she had touched. She thought of the road ahead, unknown, unwritten, but hers to walk. They found her smiling, needle at her side, the sun warm on her face. They buried her beneath the apple tree she had planted, her grave marked with a stone carved with the sigil of House Stark and the image of a dragon in flight. The children wept, and the old men sang, and the legend of Arya Stark grew ever brighter. In the years that followed, the world changed again. Old enemies made peace, new dangers arose, and were met with courage. The dragons became rarer, wilder, but their memory endured. The North remained strong, the children of Arya students carrying her lessons into the deep woods, the high mountains, and beyond the sea. Stories of Arya lived wherever courage was needed, wherever a girl ran free beneath the sky, wherever a wolf's howl echoed in the night. They said she walked the woods still, her shadow long in the twilight, her spirit guarding the wild places, her laughter in the river's song. And so the tale of the girl who killed a queen and took a dragon to the east became a legend that would never die, a promise that the world, no matter how scarred, could be made whole again, and that even the fiercest fire could give light as well as burn. Time unspooled like river water through 1,000 stones. Swift, implacable, sometimes surging, sometimes whispering through roots and bones. Arya Stark became part of that current, no longer the hunted girl of a ruined kingdom, nor the masked assassin who forgot her own name. She moved as the years demanded, never rooted, but never fleeing. Every footstep shaping the world as much as it shaped her. As the generations turned, Arya's legend carried ahead of her like a wolf's shadow across snow. In the north, the bards wove her tale into song. The wolf queen with the dragons, the blade without a master, the wanderer who returned to her kin only to vanish again into wild country. Southrons told their own stories, some true, some false, some spun from fear. Arya with 1,000 faces, Arya who spoke to beasts, Arya whose sword could cut through dreams. But Arya herself wanted none of it. She walked roads few remembered, keeping always to the borderlands where the known world thinned and the wild pressed close. Sometimes she crossed a river to help a crofter whose goats had vanished. Sometimes she slipped into a village at night, leaving herbs for a fevered child, or mending the fence where wolves prowled too close. The small folk learned to trust a quiet shadow among the birches, to leave thanks, an apple, a twist of bread, a whispered blessing in the hollows of old trees. For a long time the dragon stayed with her. Drogon grew slow with age, his wings sweeping wider arcs, his eyes golden and patient as the sun itself. The others, Lady, Ghost, Shaggy Dog, and Grey Wind, found their own places in the wild. Lady claimed the greenest forests, Ghost took to the icy cliffs. Shaggy Dog vanished south to the marshes. Grey Wind became the terror of distant mountains. When they returned, it was always with the old pack's confidence, each knowing their place beside Arya and Drogon. The world itself softened, war's shadow retreating into rumor. Sansa ruled wisely from Winterfell, her children and then their children after her. keeping the north strong but open, wary but never cruel. The other kingdoms found their peace, sometimes uneasy, sometimes bought with hard words and harder silences, but peace all the same. The dragons so feared at first became a kind of promise, untamed, yes, but never tyrannical. They were a reminder that the world had changed and could change again, that nothing was forever fixed in blood or stone. Arya's wanderings brought her to the edge of the map. She walked east to the ruins of old Valyria, picking among the bones and glassy stones, feeling the ghosts press close but finding no menace there. Drogon soared over shattered spires, sending wyverns scattering. In the ruins, Arya found eggs, gray as mist, veined in blue and silver, their heat slow and pulsing. She left them where they lay. Magic, she knew, could not be forced. It had its own cycles and seasons, its own price. On a cold morning, she built a cairn atop a mound of fused glass, set a single stone at its peak, and whispered Daenerys' name to the wind. In the free cities she traveled in secret, moving as the faceless men had taught her. Never the same face twice, never the same name for long. She watched the world's commerce, the gains of coin and steel. She dined with magisters and played cards with thieves, always learning, always listening. Once, in Braavos, she stood before the house of black and white, its doors as silent as her own memories. She walked away, satisfied that chapter was truly ended. In the south, Arya visited Dorne's orange groves, where the sun was sharp and laughter loud. There she spent a season learning the songs of the Rhoynar, teaching children how to track the wind and listen for snakes in the grass. She left as quietly as she came, with a new knife at her belt and a new secret smile, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She crossed the sea again, for a time living on the islands east of Yiti, where forests were green as emerald and flowers larger than a man's fist. Here, the dragons hunted peacocks and wild boar, and Arya swam in hot springs and learned the tongue of the Jade Men. She never claimed rule or riches. Her only price was stories, and she paid in songs of snow and wolves, dragons and the dead. Wherever Arya went, she carried needle. The blade remained sharp, the hilt worn smooth by her hand. In lonely moments, she spoke aloud the names it had known. Her father's gift, her brother's scowl, Gendry's uncertain smile. The sword had outlived every story she'd ever told, and Arya understood that it would outlast her too, so long as someone cared enough to remember. Sometimes, in the hush before dawn, Arya wondered if she would ever truly rest. Peace, she thought, was not a place or a time, but a thing built from choices. It was what she did for the small folk, for the dragons, for herself. She had been so many things: daughter, sister, killer, ghost, legend, but she had become above all, a protector. She had learned at last that the world was not to be punished for its pain, but healed by whatever hands dared the work. There were challenges still, and loss, and grief. Once, word reached her that Shaggydog had been killed by poachers in the marshes far south. A dozen arrows bringing down his mighty bulk, his skull stolen for a merchant's haul. Arya found the men, silent as moonlight, and Needle whispered justice. She did not linger for their curses, nor did she speak the names of the dead. She mourned alone on the salt marsh, singing the pack song to the empty sky, tears streaking her cheeks. As the decades passed, Arya grew old by degrees, though she never softened much, and her eyes lost none of their bite. Her hair grew white, her hands gnarled, her step cautious only in ice. Children grew up hearing her stories. Grandchildren watched for the shadow of dragons in the evening light. Sometimes, a stranger would visit her campfire, seeking wisdom or healing or vengeance. She gave what she could, and never more than she must. At last, when even Drogon moved only with effort, and the seasons wheeled in familiar, gentle circles, Arya built a cottage by the bank of a river she loved. There, she planted apple trees, kept a garden of wild herbs, and watched the sun move across the fields. She grew vegetables and raised hounds, taking pleasure in the small work of each day. She watched the world's changes with a quiet joy. The north at peace. The dragons remembered not in fear, but in song and heraldry. Visitors still came, sometimes children of old friends, sometimes those with no name at all. Arya fed them, told stories by the fire, taught them to fight if they wished, or to heal if they had the patience. She became wise woman and wolf queen and teacher, never staying long in one role, always ready for a new shape, a new challenge. One autumn, when the leaves turned gold and the river ran thick with salmon, Arya knew her time was coming. She felt it in her bones. The slow ache of years, the easy peace of one who has finished her long work. Drogon had died the winter before, curled around the apple trees, his body a black hill, now tangled with vines and bright flowers. The other dragons came rarely, shadows in the clouds, but Arya saw their trails, heard their calls, and smiled. She spent her last days walking the riverbank, watching the water run toward the distant sea. She sat under her apple tree, needle on her lap, humming songs of the north, of wolves, of snow and starlight. In her last week, children came and gathered round, listening as she told her story. The story of Arya Stark, who went east on a dragon's back, who brought fire and mercy, who wandered and loved and learned to be at peace. On the night she died, the moon was full and the sky clear. Arya lay in her narrow bed, listening to the river's hush. She thought of her family, of Sansa and Jon, of Bran and Rickon, of her father and mother and all the pack she'd known. She thought of Gendry, of friends lost and friends found, of faces she'd worn and faces she'd left behind. She smiled, drifting away on the current, her heart light, her mind free. In the morning, they found her as she'd lived, fierce, calm, sword at her side, eyes closed but smiling. They buried her beneath the apple tree, laying needle atop the stone, her grave marked by a wolf and a dragon carved together. The village kept her house, children played in the wild garden, and the story of Arya became more than legend. It became a hope, a guide, a living thing that changed with every telling. The dragons remained wild but gentle, their shadows a promise in the sky. The world moved on, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but never again did it forget the lesson Arya Stark had left behind. That the greatest power is mercy, and that true strength is found not in conquering the world, but in making it a home for others. Years later, when the river changed its course and the apple tree fell, the people built a cairn of stone, and every spring they placed a single blade of grass atop needle, for luck, for courage, for the road ahead. And always when the moon rose full and bright, someone, somewhere, would look to the sky and wonder if a wolf still ran beneath the stars, or a dragon's wings swept silent over the world, and remember that hope, like stories and rivers, never truly ends.